Chapter 12-17, Location of the Five Sects. Who would have imagined that the once invincible majestic Heaven sect would actually collapse one day? Venerable Trinity had disappeared, and the 24 heavenly body tier elites had also vanished. It was hard to believe that they weren't dead. Although the majestic Heaven sect had never referred to itself as the strongest force in the galaxy, it was obvious that the existence of an eternal river tier would intimidate the entire galaxy. Now that the elites of the majestic Heaven sect had suddenly disappeared, the galaxy naturally descended into chaos and turmoil. Long absent and large-scale battles were imminent, and planets would perhaps even invade other planets. The battles wouldn't be limited to continents. However, true elites would also rise from these great battles after all. How could supreme prodigies appear in times of peace and inactivity? Meanwhile, the disciples of the majestic Heaven sect also returned where they had come from, be that their clans or their kingdoms. As for Ling Han, he decided to remain on the Flying Cloud planet for a little longer. Here, the Mo clan was currently using their network to help him look for the five sects. However, this required time. In any case, Ling Han would only set off after breaking through to the Sun-Moon tier anyway. Thus, he wasn't in much of a hurry. Hunyo had told Ling Han some cultivation secrets, for example, the uses of mountains and rivers, suns and moons, and heavenly bodies. These entities weren't merely limited to storing power, and they could actually be unleashed to suppress one's opponent. In fact, they could even form their own worlds. For example, one could unleash their mountains and rivers and trap their opponent within this landscape. Meanwhile, suns and moons and heavenly bodies were naturally more powerful. The overall level of cultivation in this galaxy was far too low, and thus cultivators' utilization of their own power was also extremely limited. Such situations would never appear in high-level galaxies. So, it turns out that I can still raise my battle prowess by a significant amount. Ling Han murmured to himself. He suppressed his cultivation level and battled against Ding Ping, Feng Piyun, and the others. Their cultivation levels were the same, yet Ling Han's battle prowess instantly increased explosively when he unleashed his mountains and rivers to suppress his opponent. This was because unleashing his mountains and rivers created a scenario where he was battling in his own world. Thus, he could naturally detect all the movements of his opponent. Moreover, he could also use his world to continually affect his opponent. Even if hundreds upon thousands of mountain river tier cultivators were to attack me at this moment, I would be able to divide and defeat them one by one. In terms of unleashing one's full potential, this galaxy is still stagnant at a primitive level. However, Venerable Trinity clearly unleashed his eternal river at that time. He unleashed a silver river that formed a defensive barrier around Yang Hao. He probably learned that secret technique at the two-realm battlefield. However, he didn't teach this secret technique to the disciples of his sect. Perhaps he was planning to teach this secret technique to his true successor only. Ling Han wasn't one to keep his knowledge from others. Although he wasn't generous enough to teach such a secret technique to everyone, he would definitely teach it to those close to him, such as Feng Piyun, Mu Rongqing, Ding Ping, and the others. Moreover, he would naturally teach it to Hu Feiyun as well. Once she learned it, Empress Luan Xing would have also learned it. As for whether she taught it to others, Ling Han didn't care at all. This was simply a technique to fully utilize one's mountains and rivers, suns and moons, and heavenly bodies. It wasn't some unteachable secret. Several days later, the Chaotic Star's majestic empire sent a starship to collect cultivators from the empire. Hu Feiyun, Li Weiwei, and the others all boarded the starship to return. Ling Han had initially wanted to kill Zhao Luan as well, yet he had fled quickly and returned to the joint peace planet on a merchant ship. Meanwhile, Feng Piyun, Mu Rongqing, and the others didn't leave. They wanted to search for the five sects alongside Ling Han. They had all come from the small world, so they naturally couldn't forget the sins of the five sects. Everyone cultivated earnestly. Once they learned of the five sects' location, they would immediately set off for that galaxy. At that time, bloodshed would be inevitable. Thus, the more powerful they were, the better. Due to the collapse of the majestic Heaven sect, the two other forces on the flying cloud planet, the Foreseas Majestic Empire and the Great Heaven Majestic Empire, were finally able to rise. They invaded and conquered the land that had previously belonged to the Majestic Heaven sect. This naturally led to a series of large-scale battles. However, these battles had nothing to do with Ling Han. He simply guarded his own plot of land. Meanwhile, he used copious amounts of level 4 godly metal obtained by the Mo clan establishment to raise the level of his divine demon sword. Before setting off to search for the 5 sects, there were 2 goals that he had to satisfy: break through to the Sun-Moon tier and evolve the divine demon sword to level 5 godly metal. He had already reached the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier, yet breaking through to the Sun-Moon tier still wasn't something that he could in a short amount of time. This required not only the accumulation of comprehension, but also the accumulation of origin power. Advancing from the Mountain River tier to the Sun-Moon tier was a huge leap. Thus, one needed to accumulate enough comprehension and origin power before attempting to break through. Otherwise, they would be sucked dry. Ling Han also prepared godly medicines as he completed his accumulation. If his accumulation turned out to be insufficient, he could at least still rely on a large number of godly medicines to make up for any deficiencies. This would save him from the wretched fate of having his life essence sucked dry. He was so busy that he had no time to focus on alchemy. He basically sat under the reincarnation tree every single day, cultivating the Mountain River tier to perfection as he explored the great Tao of the Sun-Moon tier. Half a year flew by in the blink of an eye. To immortals, half a year was truly like the blink of an eye. To Ling Han and the others, however, this was several hundred years of comprehension. Ling Han was already confident that he could break through to the Sun-Moon tier. At the same time, the Mo clan also delivered some good news. They had found the location of the 5 sects. They were on the Cloud Apex planet, a planet that was located in the Long Light Galaxy. The Cloud Apex planet was a 200-year flight away from the Flying Cloud planet. This was an extremely long distance. Otherwise, it wouldn't have taken the Mo clan so long to find them. In fact, they had only found the 5 sects after contacting merchant after merchant and slowly spreading and expanding their network. Fortunately, Hunyo had modified his cloud-piercing shuttle and made it many times faster than ordinary starships. She had also installed a star chart, and thus they didn't need to worry about getting lost. Their trip would take around 2 years. Very well. Ling Han began to break through to the Sun-Moon tier. After 7 days, he opened the door to a completely new world. A red sun formed in his dantian, and heavenly tribulation also rumbled over at this moment. Ling Han would repeat his agonizing process and he would shatter his godly bones and temper them under the tribulation, causing them to become tougher and stronger than before. Meanwhile, the auctioning of his 4 drops of thousand source true fluid and the abundant amount of ancient pill recipes had also brought him a great amount of wealth. Not only had he cleared his debt, but he still had a large amount of leftover wealth to spend on level 4 godly metal. That was exactly what he did next. Only at this moment did Ling Han feed his divine demon sword the last piece of level 4 godly metal. His divine demon sword advanced to level 5. Human and sword faced heavenly tribulation together. Boom! Thunder rumbled and lightning flashed. This was a terrifying scene. Like always, Ling Han shattered his godly bones. Meanwhile, a web of cracks appeared on the divine demon sword. However, it didn't snap. Instead, it continued to expel a large number of metal shreds from its body. These shreds were slag, useless bits of material. It was as if the divine sword had developed a spirit of its own as it actively evolved, aiming for a state of perfection. The rain of lightning eventually enveloped Ling Han and his divine demon sword, its brilliance illuminating the sky and universe. Chapter 12:18, Fusing with the Power of Lightning. Ling Han endured the heavenly tribulation, and tempered himself as he did so to increase his appreciation of the great Tao. The tribulation represented the strongest danger at the Tao of heaven and earth could present. If he could appreciate this kind of great Tao, his own battle prowess would be increased greatly. Ling Han was comprehending his own Tao. He had already grasped the basics of the lightning sword technique, but this was more in name than in fact. It was only because this sword technique possessed the two traits of quickness and massive destructive ability, which was why he had named it the lightning sword technique. Only if he could also fuse it with the power of divine lightning would the lightning sword technique not be just a mere name, but also a real entity. How fast was the divine lightning? What if it could also possess this kind of unique trait? Though Ling Han had been turned into dust, his divine sense was still firm. Under the tempering of the indestructible heaven's scroll, his spirit was incredibly firm. Even if it was separated from his form and had turned into a ball of light, no matter how the heavenly tribulation attacked, it was not damaged. The strength of his spirit was actually in the level above the low extreme of the sun-moon tier and below the medium extreme. Thus, it was naturally impossible that this power of lightning on the level of the early stage of the sun-moon tier would be able to hurt his spirit. In the midst of the tribulation, he could experience the power of lightning very well, and understand it straight to its essence. Unfortunately, the heavenly tribulation comes too rarely, and won't last for too long either, Ling Han thought. However, an idea immediately appeared to him. Personally, I would only endure the heavenly tribulation just those few times on my own, but couldn't I borrow the chance of others to endure the tribulation? If I could control this lightning technique, then whether it is the sword technique or the movement technique, they will be greatly improved. Half a day later, all the thunderclouds dispersed. Ling Han channeled a drop of the indestructible true fluid, and his body immediately recovered completely. Furthermore, he felt that there was an apparent change in himself. The sun-moon tier. His power had increased at least 1,000,000 from before he endured the tribulation. True enough, this is a massive barrier. Once I have crossed over it, I originally could have power surpassing 10 stars, and now, only 6 stars is left behind. To once more possess power surpassing 10 stars, I will have to cultivate to the pinnacle level of the sun-moon tier. However, only those who had reached the pinnacle level in the mountain river tier could possess 6 stars of power before sun-moon tier. Moreover, he would have to reach the peak stage of the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier. If it was an ordinary mountain river tier, the most he would possess would be 4 stars of power. Only once he had cultivated to the pinnacle level would his power surpass 4 stars. Based on what he had achieved in the pinnacle level, his power would be in between 4 to 6 stars. My present power is capable of matching the late stage of the medium extreme of the sun-moon tier. However, this is only in terms of pure power. In terms of the understanding of the regulations of heaven and earth, I am still in the early stage of the low extreme of the sun-moon tier. Thus, even if I had another secret technique, my battle prowess would only be able to surpass 6 to 7 stars. Hence, the public all say that 5-star geniuses only existed in legends. Though that is a bit exaggerated, it is also a very logical understanding. That is because there are really too few people who have cultivated to the pinnacle level. Huh? Ling Han was startled, and asked, "Small tower, why is there no change to the black tower?" He had broken through a major tier already, so why did a new level not appear in the black tower so that his 5 elements would be complete? You have to advance by another tier. Surprisingly, Small Tower gave him a clear answer this time. What? Ling Han almost jumped. I have to reach the heavenly body tier before I can unlock the 5th level? Wouldn't that mean that by the time I reach the Genesis tier, I would only be able to unlock the 7th level at most? Wrong. When you reach the Genesis tier, you will only be able to unlock the 6th level, Small Tower said with complete seriousness. Ling Han was stunned. Then what about the remaining 3 levels? I will only be able to unlock them when I advance into the celestial realm? Small Tower waved to and fro. This was its movement for nodding. So, you have to cultivate as much as possible. When the Black Tower is fully unlocked, I will also be able to recover all my memories. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, so, going by that logic, your memories have not been dispersed, but have rather been sealed. Perhaps, Small Tower said calmly. Young man, work hard on cultivating. Just think, if you once again break through at the Genesis tier, you will be able to enter into the celestial realm. And in my vague memories, those in the celestial realm should live eternally. What? Ling Han was astonished. The elites of the celestial realm actually possessed unlimited lifespan? Then how powerful was this celestial realm? Elites could continue cultivating for 1 billion, 100 billion, 1 trillion years, and become stronger and stronger. No wonder such a precious treasure like the reincarnation tree existed. Even Genesis tiers could not wait for 12 trillion years, but the elites of the celestial realm could. However, you do not have to be discouraged. Though the lifespan of elites in the celestial realm is unlimited, there is still the celestial decline. If they cannot survive it, they, too, will be killed, Small Tower said calmly. An unlimited lifespan does not mean eternal indestructibility. Ling Han nodded. The original owner of the Black Tower should have been an elite of the celestial realm, yet he had still died. Young man, race towards the sun. Small Tower exclaimed. Ling Han was struck speechless. He discovered that this tool's spirit displayed the trait of being two-faced more and more frequently. He returned to the small town. Since he had already endured the heavenly tribulation, and crossed over into the sun-moon tier, then he should set out towards the cloud apex planet. However, Feng Peyun and the others broke through one after the other, so Ling Han could only delay his plans for a while, waiting for this trend of breaking through to pass before setting out. Feng Peyun and Mu Rongqing had both advanced into the medium extreme of the mountain river tier. Helian Tianyun was ahead of them by 1 cultivation level, and had advanced into the high extreme. Ding Ping's progress was the most exaggerated, had reached the consummate level. If they told anyone about this, it would definitely scare them to death. It had only been a few short years, so how could they have advanced at such a frighteningly rapid pace? However, to be honest, if they still were not able to attain such shocking advancement pace with Ling Han's continuous supply of alchemical pills to help them accumulate origin power and the reincarnation tree to help them in the comprehension of Tao, what right would Feng Peyun and the others have to call themselves prodigies? Ling Han did not rest on his laurels, either. When they endured their heavenly tribulation, Ling Han would be by their side, freeloading on their tribulation. In the eyes of others, this was practically a move to seek death. He could have done anything, yet he chose to freeload off the tribulation of others. But to Ling Han, he did not need to shatter his godly bones to temper himself. Instead, he merely had to observe the power of the heavenly tribulation, so he naturally did not need to suffer the slightest bit. He merely had to study and observe the proceedings quietly. After enduring 4 tribulations, Ling Han secluded himself beneath the reincarnation tree for 3 days. When he opened his eyes again, there was actually a flash of lightning flickering in them. In comparison to the lightning technique that I have grasped now, the thunderclap 9th heaven is practically trash. Ling Han shook his head. After all, the thunderclap 9th heaven was only the lowest grade cultivation technique of the immortal realm, whereas the heavenly tribulation was the embodiment of the heavenly Tao. How could there be any comparison? As my cultivation level becomes higher and higher, the heavenly tribulation that I have to endure will naturally become more and more powerful, and the power of lightning that I can control will also become stronger and stronger. With heaven and earth as my master, and to create my own Tao. Ling Han's gaze was determined. The path that he was about to walk was becoming clearer and clearer. Since everyone had endured the heavenly tribulation, they could not possibly have a further breakthrough in a short term, so Ling Han decided to set out. However, he had not yet begun his journey when he surprisingly encountered a person who was there to see him off. It was Empress Luan Xing. Not her doppelganger, but her true self. "You are leaving?" she asked. Her exquisite beauty was enshrouded in a chi of chaos, while her tone was calm, and not the slightest bit of fluctuation could be discerned from her voice. Since she was as strong as heavenly body tier, she was naturally capable of controlling her own emotions very well. Ling Han broke out in a smile, and said, "I was going to drop by Joint Peace Planet to bid you farewell on the way. I have not thought that you would come." Chapter 12-19, Ancestral Grounds of the Nine Snake Tribe. Empress Wuxia dispersed the chaos chi on her face, and revealed an exquisite beauty that could put the world in chaos, especially that enchanting grace. Even if Hunyao was not inferior to her in terms of beauty, in terms of bearing, she was not just a little bit weaker. After all, Hunyao was still young, so her grace had not fully developed. In the future, it might be that she would not be inferior to her in the slightest, but as of now, Empress Wuxia was definitely the greatest source of calamity, and there was no other. Involuntarily, Ling Han's eyes lit up. He would not get tired of looking at her even after seeing this source of calamity for 100 times. Furthermore, when he was with her, he would automatically forget any other person, and could only think of her. This was the enchantment of the Empress. "I want to ask you some questions," she said solemnly. "Hee, why are you acting so serious with me now?" Ling Han laughed, his eyes drifting slightly lower. "Were you not obedient, and so want me to punish you a bit?" Empress Wuxia knew what part of her he was looking at, and involuntarily felt irritated and embarrassed. When she was spanked, though it was not her main body, it was her divine sense that was dominant, so she naturally felt it as if it was truly done to her. Now, as Ling Han deliberately stared at that part of her like this, she only felt her face was burning, and a red blush involuntarily appeared. "You dare take liberties with me? Are you not afraid I would suppress you?" She humphed, putting on the forceful presence of an empress. Ling Han coughed, clasped his hands, and greeted, "I pay my respects to the Empress." "How insincere." Empress Wuxia raised her hand carelessly, and said, "Forget it, I have something to ask you." Hearing her say so twice, Ling Han, too, became serious. Though this Empress was exquisitely beautiful, she was obviously a very easily embarrassed woman. She could not endure teasing at all, and his relationship with her was not so good that he could speak sweet words to her, so it was best that he stopped before going too far. "What do you want to ask?" he asked. "About the celestial realm." Empress Wuxia said, a complicated expression appearing on her beautiful face, a mix of both loneliness and fury. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, "Then come into the Black Tower, and I will call Small Tower out as well." Empress Wuxia paused involuntarily. After entering into the Black Tower, everything would be under Ling Han's control. Previously, she had been spanked, so she still had lingering fear. Ling Han's expression darkened, and he asked, "Am I that kind of vile character?" Empress Wuxia did not answer, but the word, "yes," was written all over her face. "Fuck." Ling Han flopped down on the ground, and said, "Fine, then. Since you distrust me so much, don't go into cultivate in the future again." "Humph, everything underneath the heavens is my territory, and all are my subjects. Everything that is yours is mine, but I permit you to possess it," Empress Wuxia said proudly. "So, don't get things wrong." Looking at her proud countenance, Ling Han couldn't help but feel an itch in his heart. This filled him with an incredibly strong desire to conquer her. The enchantment of this seductive beauty seemed to have increased again. Ling Han forced down the impulse, and said, "Forget it, let us not speak of this. Is there some relation between you and the celestial realm?" Empress Wuxia hesitated slightly, and then answered, "My ancestors originated from the celestial realm." "What?" Ling Han was stunned, then suddenly clapped his hands, and said, "I know. Do all ancient divine tribes originate from the celestial realm?" Empress Wuxia nodded. "That's right. Ancient divine tribes are all tribes that have been expelled from the celestial realm. Because they possess the bloodline of the celestial realm, they are comparatively stronger." Wuxia looked at Empress Wuxia in surprise. He had been just talking about the celestial realm, and here came a descendant from the celestial realm. He asked in a dark voice, "You spoke of being expelled?" The exact time period is too ancient to remember. A war happened in the celestial realm, involving the whole celestial realm. In that war, a great many elites died, and after the war ended, the losing side was all chased out of the celestial realm, Empress Wuxia said. Ling Han's heart beat wildly. This was definitely a ground-shattering secret. Then you want to return to the celestial realm? He asked. Empress Luanxing nodded slowly. Returning to the celestial realm is the conviction of the whole Nine Snake tribe that has been passed through the generations. She looked at Ling Han, and then continued, that little girl should be the heir of some great sect from the celestial realm. She was referring to Hunyo. The Rock Palace, Ling Han said. It has been too long, and there are only very limited records of the celestial realm left behind within the tribe. Empress Luanxing sighed. In the ancestral grounds of the Nine Snake tribe, there is a Nine Snake pond. Every member of the Nine Snake tribe needs to bathe within to be able to fully activate her bloodline. To the Nine Snake tribe, this is the most important inheritance. So your most important motive in returning to the celestial realm is to regain the Nine Snake pond? Ling Han asked. It cannot be regained. Empress Luanxing shook her head. The Nine Snake Pond is formed from a part of the remains of the ancestor of the Nine Snake tribe, and the body of our ancestor is buried in the ancestral grounds. It has already become one with the mountains and plains, and cannot possibly be moved. So if the Nine Snake tribe wants to regain their glory, they can only return to the ancestral grounds? Ling Han asked. Yes. An expression of loneliness appeared on Empress Luanxing's face. However, I am now the only one left of the Nine Snake tribe. Don't worry. Ling Han stretched out his hands to hold Empress Luanxing's shoulders. In the future, we will have a whole bunch of children to bolster the bloodline of the Nine Snake tribe. Pa, his hands had not yet landed when they were already smacked away by Empress Luanxing. The pain was enough to make him grit his teeth. This empress was in the consummate level of the heavenly body tier, so a careless smack was enough to make him feel as if his bones had been broken. Do not be flippant. Empress Luanxing rebuked. Ling Han snickered. If it was another man that dared to tease the empress like this, not even his bones would be left by now. However, he had only had his hands smacked away, which meant that there was still a place for him in the empress's heart. How could there not be? Previously, she had even stood in opposition to an eternal river tear for his sake. Her words were sharp, but she was a softy at heart. I like that. Ling Han nodded, and seriously said, we will definitely charge into the celestial realm together. Empress Luanxing paused for a moment, and then said, I do not know what you desire, but be cautious on your journey. Don't worry, I will definitely return safe and sound. Ling Han said. Celestial realm, what kind of place is that? It is the celestial plane that exists in legends, where elites could possess eternal life, Empress Luanxing said. An eternal existence. The moment a conflict arises, it is indeed irresolvable, Ling Han thought. When people lived too long, they would naturally have nothing to take up their time, and would have some nonsense thoughts. Furthermore, the many elders would not die even with the passage of one generation after another, so the conflict would only deepen, and eventually culminate in war. Then, since one war had started, it was possible for a second and third to follow. The celestial realm did not seem that divine. Do not worry about your great Ling Empire, I will guard it well on your behalf, Empress Luanxing continued. Then, with a wave of her fluttering robes, she said, I am leaving. Hold on, Ling Han called out. Empress Luanxing stopped and turned around, a questioning look on her face. Ling Han broke into a smile, and said, once we separate now, it will definitely take a great many years before we next meet. Aren't you going to give me a farewell hug? Empress Luanxing immediately rolled her eyes at him, the chi of chaos once more enshrouding her beautiful face. She spat out only 2 words. Get lost. Chapter 12:20, Arrival. Ling Han and his group finally set off. The cloud-piercing shuttle could not accommodate so many people, but that was fine as it had already been remodeled into a starship. With the star chart, they only had to enter the galactic coordinates, and it would be able to move automatically. Thus, everyone could enter into the Black Tower to cultivate, and did not have to worry about steering. Even if the cloud-piercing shuttle had been remodeled, they would still need an entire 2 years to reach the cloud apex planet. For immortals, 2 years' time could not be considered long, but everyone naturally would not be wasting these precious 2 years away. Cultivate. Cultivate. And more cultivating. The Black Tower lacked spiritual chi, but that was fine. There was a great amount of true origin stones available. Furthermore, they had many alchemical pills. As long as Ling Han's cultivation level was in the lead, he would be able to supply a great amount of alchemical pills for those by his side, letting everyone's cultivation soar along with his. Everyone was cultivating, and only Ling Han was still spending a great amount of time on alchemy. Since he had crossed over into the Sun-Moon tier, he wanted to attempt concocting the Berserk Blood Spirit pill. A single pill would be able to allow an advancement of a sub-minor level. In theory, he only needed 16 pills, and he would be able to reach the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. What more, when he had the reincarnation tree to strengthen his comprehension of the cultivation level, he did not have to worry that pure reliance on alchemical pills to advance his cultivation level would lead to instability of his cultivation level. However, this kind of nature-defying alchemical pill would definitely have correspondingly heavy side effects, and could not be taken continuously. However, even if he took one per year, he would only need 16 years to be able to pass through the Sun-Moon tier. And this was on the basis that he was not doing anything else in the meantime. Otherwise, it would be even faster. Of course, if his comprehension was inadequate, it would be useless even with the reincarnation tree. He would be stuck on some cultivation level, unable to break through. Even if he were given 10,000 Berserk Blood Spirit pills, he would still be helplessly stuck. The Berserk Blood Spirit pill was a level 8 divine pill, yet Ling Han was only a level 5 alchemist at present. Hence, he could not succeed in a single go, and had to slowly progress through the levels. Thankfully, among the great number of ancient pill recipes he had obtained, there were naturally level 6 and 7 pill recipes he could practice with. Ling Han first studied a level 6 pill recipe, which was called Explosive Thunder Pill. After taking this pill, one would temporarily possess the power of lightning, and get a boost of 2 stars to his battle prowess. Even though that was just 2 stars, it had to be known that even someone as freakish as Ling Han only had 6 stars of regular battle prowess. Then, wasn't a boost of 2 stars of power already quite awesome enough? However, the higher the battle prowess, the smaller the boost that this explosive thunder pill would provide. If he used it, he would definitely not be able to get the effects of a boost of 2 stars. He would probably be getting a boost of 1 star, and just barely. The reason why he chose this pill recipe to concoct was because Ling Han just happened to have lightning fruit in his possession, and this was the main ingredient to concoct the explosive thunder pill. After spending 5 months' time, Ling Han finally grasped the method of concoction, but he still failed 9 times before he finally concocted the first explosive thunder pill successfully. This was a level 6 divine pill, and concocting it once would take as long as half a month. Of course, this was referring to successful concoction. When Ling Han had first begun concoction, his furnace had exploded after only 1 day. He had slowly improved from there. Then he began to study a level 7 pill recipe, the Spiritual Rain Bone Developing Pill, tempering his godly bones, and improving his physique. This was a very rarely seen godly medicine, and amongst level 7 alchemical pills, it was one of the top-ranked. The time he spent on this was even longer. Only after an entire 7 months did Ling Han begin to try concoction, and when he successfully produced the first furnace of Spiritual Rain Bone Developing Pills, their galactic journey of 2 years was also about to end. Not only had Feng Peyun and the others completely stabilized their cultivation levels after breaking through, their improvement was also apparent, particularly Ding Ping's. He had reached the late stage of the consummate level, which was very, very shocking. Ahead of them appeared a planet, whose main color was crimson. This was the Cloud Apex planet. The reason why its main color was crimson was because an aquatic plant called Crimson Cloud Aquatic Grass was growing everywhere on the Cloud Apex planet, and the Cloud Apex planet had a lot of bodies of water, so the whole planet looked completely crimson. The cloud-piercing shuttle stopped, and was switched to Ling Han driving it manually. However, after it had been modified into a starship, it was actually not appropriate to use as a flight god tool anymore, because it was slow to start, and once it burst, its speed was too fast, so it would easily crash. Hence, starships were starships, whereas flight god tools were flight god tools, and both basically could not be used interchangeably. Though Ling Han was very careful, when the cloud-piercing shuttle landed, it still crashed. Thankfully, the defensive formations had also been improved, and it did not shatter even after suffering such impact. Otherwise, Ling Han would have to start worrying how he was going to return to the Joint Peace Planet. He stored the cloud-piercing shuttle into the Black Tower, and Feng Piyun and the others all came out to breath in the air of this planet. In terms of spiritual qi, it seems to be slightly better than both the Joint Peace Planet and Flying Cloud Planet, they judged. Perhaps the overall martial arts level of this place is higher. The 5 sects only had elites of the Sun-Moon tier, but that did not mean that this planet was also the same. Their landing area was deep in the mountains, and they had taken a bit of effort to finally walk out of the mountains, and enter into a small town in the vicinity. First, they had to know where exactly they were, and where the 5 sects were. When Ling Han and his group entered into the small town, they all looked surprised because there was a great many strangely shaped person who had the heads of bulls, heads of goats, tails of tigers, and so on. They were demonic beasts who had cultivated to the immortal level, and had thus taken human form. On the Joint Peace Planet and Flying Cloud Planet, demonic beasts and humans were standing on completely different and opposite sides. Both parties were sworn enemies who would devour each other if they had the chance, but looking at this place, there were obviously many humans in the small town, yet they seemed to have a peaceful relationship with the demonic beasts. It was a different universe, with a different environment. They were very curious, but the human-shaped demonic beasts here did not even spare them a second glance, just as if they were used to seeing human cultivators. Ling Han and his group entered a restaurant, and asked for a private room. In any case, true origin stones was the shared currency of the whole immortal realm. They called a waiter and made discreet inquiries, and finally got a better understanding of this planet. In this place, the reason why the demonic beasts and humans could be on good terms with one another was because they all had a common enemy, the Netherworld. That was right. This was the passageway of the 2 realms. All cultivators were duty-bound to head out to resist the invasion of the Netherworld, and as time passed, it was natural that the human race and demonic beasts would no longer have strife between them, aiming their collective blades and weapons at their shared enemy instead. Of course, even amongst humans themselves, internal conflict was inevitable, what more when it was between 2 completely different races. However, in comparison to the absolute opposition between humans and demonic beasts on Joint Peace Planet, this place was a great many times better. In short, the main theme here was opposing the Netherworld. No one could stand against this main idea, or they would be treated like a spy from the Netherworld and executed. Ling Han bought a map, and after studying it, he realized that the 5 sects were all located in the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire, which was not that far from their current location. It was about half a month's journey away. Imperial Empire. That meant that this force would definitely have an elite of the Eternal River tier standing guard. The present emperor of the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire was respectfully called the Crimson Flames Emperor. It was said that 1,000,000 years ago, he had already reached the peak stage of the Eternal River tier, and was presently planning to pass on his imperial throne to his descendant, while he himself would be putting his full effort into attempting to break through to the Genesis tier. To be passed on to his descendant, and not his child. Why was it so? That was because this Crimson Flames Emperor had really lived for too long. His children and grandchildren had all died, while he was still determinately living. Hence, his imperial throne could naturally only be passed on to one of his great-grandchildren. Chapter 1221, Lin Pavilion. Now that they knew the exact location of the 5 sects, Ling Han and his group set out immediately. In half a month's time, Ling Han had obtained new enlightenment on the concoction of the spiritual rain bone-developing pill. He did not begin concoction, but merely meditated to make up for his shortcomings. He was sure that when he opened his furnace, not only would he be able to guarantee a successful concoction, there would also be a very great improvement. They entered into the territory of the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire, journeyed on for a further 5 days, and arrived at the Red Cloud's Perch Mountains, the location of the Cloud Phoenix sect. This was naturally because he wanted to first find the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and then research on how he was to overthrow the 5 sects. Though the actions of the 5 sects were definitely forbidden in the immortal realm, the lower realm had already opened the sky and come to the immortal realm. Naturally, they no longer had proof, so how were they to prove that the 5 sects had once refined the living beings of a small world into an alchemical pill? Thus, Ling Han naturally could not choose the path of complaining, but rather planned to use his own hands to overthrow the 5 sects. This would be even more satisfying. Who knows what cultivation level the Sword Emperor and the Setting Sun Saber Emperor are at? Ling Han thought. These were beings that he could only admire from afar at one point, but in the immortal realm, even the Sword Emperor and the others might not be qualified to be called prodigies. Well, it was still uncertain. Perhaps, in the immortal realm, they could still maintain their astonishing natural talent, and remain stunning for their whole lives. He suppressed his competitive spirit, and came to a small town at the foot of the Red Cloud's Perch Mountains. This small town depended on the Cloud Phoenix sect to exist, and cultivators were everywhere. Some had come to seek a master, while others had come to ask for the help of the Cloud Phoenix sect to settle some problems that they were unable to resolve on their own. Some had come to pay a visit, whereas others had come here to do business. In short, to judge whether a force was flourishing or otherwise, one needed only see if its subsidiary town was prospering or lively. If it was so quiet that there were not many visitors, then this force naturally was not all that powerful. Going by that understanding, the Cloud Phoenix sect was truly existing quite prosperously. Ling Han and his brothers, along with Ding Ping and Heli and Tian Yun, stayed here for a few days, and unobtrusively made their inquiries. However, to their disappointment, there was no news of the location of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Not only was there no news of the location of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, there were no clues even for the Sword Emperor, the Setting Sun Saber Emperor, and the others. Oh, right. Ling Han clapped his hands. The Sword Emperor and Setting Sun Saber Emperor were called so because that was reality for them in the small world, but now that they had come to the immortal realm, would they still dare to address themselves as such? If you called yourself an emperor, what would the Crimson Flames Emperor be? Then, they must have changed their nicknames. Of course, Ling Han knew the name of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, but this name was very strange. Years ago, just to find out this name, he had half cajoled, and half forced the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden in the name of his assistance in concocting alchemical pills for her. It was after that time when he had become the target of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, just as if he had committed a very, very great crime against her. Additionally, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had also warned him to definitely not reveal her name to another person. So how do I find her? Ling Han was troubled, and after thinking for a while, he decided to first find his 4 disciples. As he saw it, when the 5 sects descended 10,000 years ago, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden should have brought his 4 disciples along with her to the immortal realm. Then, he would only have to find his 4 disciples, and he would naturally be able to find out where the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was. He decided to do just that. He switched to asking around about the locations of Jiang Yufeng, Chen Rui Jing, Yun Yong Wang, and Kang Xiu Yuan. This, on the other hand, very soon produced results. Yun Yong Wang and Kang Xiu Yuan were presently quite well known, and were the 2 chief alchemists of the Han Lin Pavilion. Han Lin Pavilion? If the words Han Lin were turned around, then wouldn't it be pronounced Ling Han? Come, let's go to Big Trade City. The Han Lin Pavilion was precisely in Big Trade City, and Big Trade City was merely 2 days' journey away from the Red Cloud's Perch Mountains, and was also the nearest large city for the Cloud Phoenix sect. Very soon, they arrived, and after making some slight inquiries, they soon found out that the Han Lin Pavilion had only existed for a few thousand years, but in recent times, it was developing better and better. The 2 chief alchemists had both broken through to level 5, and their talent was extremely shocking. Being able to break through to become a level 5 alchemist meant that one's cultivation level had also reached the Sun-Moon tier. Otherwise, the strength of his spirit would not be sufficient to support the concoction of level 5 divine pills aside from a very limited, rare few, whose spirits were incredibly strong. Ling Han nodded internally. The improvement of his two disciples was quite impressive because they focused on alchemy. Even with that, they could manage to advance from the shattering void tier to the Sun-Moon tier in 10,000 years' time. This improvement was extremely astonishing. As expected of his disciples. Because this involved his previous life, Ling Han had Feng Piyun by a courtyard in the city where they settled down. Afterwards, it would be possible for them to go their separate ways. As they continued to learn through experience, they could gather information about the 5 sects. Read more chapter on novel full. To them, the 5 sects still belonged to the category of massive entities. Furthermore, this was an imperial empire, where there were extremely great numbers of heavenly body tier elites, and even eternal river tiers numbered in the tens or even hundreds. Who knew if the 5 sects had a powerful background? Getting revenge was a must, but they definitely could not allow themselves to die in the process. Ling Han took a stroll. This big trade city was also one where humans and demonic beasts cohabited, filling him with an urge to capture the demonic beasts walking by his side and turn them into a delicious feast. He secretly begged pardon in his heart. His true nature as a glutton was difficult to change. After a while, he arrived at the Lin Pavilion. There were so many people. At the entrance, people crowded around, so many that it was practically impenetrable. Ling Han couldn't help but feel curious. This business was really too good, wasn't it? They were crowding in like this just to buy some alchemical pills? He heard the conversation of others around him, and only then did he find out that it was not that the Lin Pavilion's business was really as booming as this, but rather because there was a challenger. The opponent was an alchemist from the Treasure Forest Pavilion, and expressed his intention to have a friendly competition with the Lin Pavilion in alchemy. Those were his words, but everyone very clearly understood that the Treasure Forest Pavilion had come here to crash the party and beat down on the momentum of the Lin Pavilion. It was because the Treasure Forest Pavilion had initially been the largest alchemy trader in Big Trade City, but now, the Lin Pavilion had emerged so suddenly and strongly. Though the latter was still far off from threatening the position of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, there were some beginning signs of it. The Treasure Forest Pavilion was a colossal entity, and the Treasure Forest Pavilion in Big Trade City was only a single branch. It was said that this alchemy business spread all over the whole imperial empire, and possessed shocking wealth and power. Even the Crimson Flames Emperor had to give them some face. Hence, now that there was an alchemist from the Treasure Forest Pavilion here to crash in on their scene, it was natural that not a single person was optimistic about the Lin Pavilion winning. Lost again. A round of exclamations sounded from in front of the masses. Everyone shook their heads. It turned out that the Lin Pavilion had already lost 4 rounds in a row. Ling Han forced his way forwards. What kind of power did he possess now? He merely needed to slightly channel the power of Sun-Moon tier, and he easily managed to squeeze to the forefront of the crowd. This was already inside the Lin Pavilion, and there was a wide space deliberately left empty in the center. There were 2 alchemist furnaces in place, and the party on either side was visibly standing on clearly opposing sides, each behind a single furnace. Yin Yong Wang. Kang Xiao Yuan. Ling Han immediately discovered his 2 disciples. 10,000 years had passed, but there was not much change in their appearance. They only appeared to have become calmer and more collected, steadier than before. Ho ho, we have already competed for half a month, and you all have already lost 4 rounds in a row. Even if we compete in a 5th round, the results will be the same. In the Treasure Forest Pavilion's camp, an old man smiled calmly, appearing to be filled with confidence. In this half a month's time, they had competed from concocting level 1 divine pills all the way to level 4, and it was a complete victory for the Treasure Forest Pavilion so far. Not necessarily. Yin Yong Wang humphed, and then turned to look at Kang Xiao Yuan. Third, you go or I go. Me then. Kang Xiao Yuan stepped out. Chapter 1222, Chapter 1224. Though the Lin Pavilion had lost 4 rounds in a row, it was just like a spar and a sect mountain river tiers could lose all 4 rounds, but once a Sun Moon tier elite won a single round, the tables would be turned. Alchemy was like that as well. The strongest in the Lin Pavilion were the 2 level 5 alchemists. Thus, if they wanted to completely suppress the Lin Pavilion, they would have to completely defeat these 2 level 5 alchemists. Their previous victories would naturally not be wasted either, as they would prove that the Treasure Forest Pavilion surpassed the Lin Pavilion all the way from level 1 to level 4 alchemical pills. The Treasure Forest Pavilion was really quite ruthless, beating down on the Lin Pavilion all the way from the lowest level to the highest. Then, if others wanted to buy alchemical pills, they would definitely consider the Treasure Forest Pavilion at first. There was nothing that could be done, since their quality was higher, after all. All medicine would have a specific amount of poison. No alchemical pills could be taken in big amounts. So, under the conditions when the number was fixed, they would naturally choose the better quality. Hence, as long as Treasure Forest Pavilion defeated the 2 level 5 alchemists of the Lin Pavilion as well, then this competition would naturally end with a complete victory of the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Furthermore, it was taking place fully in public, and had already continued for half a month's time. Who in the city did not know about it yet? Kang Xiao Yuan stepped up, and asked, "Who will be competing with me?" "I shall." A middle-aged man walked out. He looked very average, but a powerful scent of medicinal ingredients radiated from him. That was because he had spent many years handling medicinal ingredients and alchemical pills. "Liang Jinbo?" Kang Xiao Yuan asked in a deep voice. "Ho ho, you recognize me?" the middle-aged man asked. Kang Xiao Yuan chuckled, and said, "I have long heard of Grandmaster Liang's great name. I heard that Grandmaster Liang has long become a level 5 alchemist 100,000 years ago, and now should not be very far from level 6, correct?" A lofty expression appeared on Liang Jinbo's face. Alchemy was the same as martial arts. Every step forwards was extremely difficult. Even though he was already a level 5 alchemist since 100,000 years ago, he was still presently on this level. But, how long would it take to go from the low extreme of Sun Moon tier to the medium extreme? For someone with slightly better talent, they would need 400,000 to 500,000 years. Thus, he had merely spent 100,000 years, and there was hope of his breaking through to become a level 6 alchemist. This was actually very, very extraordinary, and completely deserved to be called prodigious. Kang Xiao Yuan, you can be considered a genius of alchemy yourself, so why don't you bring the Lin Pavilion with you and come over to our Treasure Forest Pavilion? Liang Jinbo extended an olive branch. Kang Xiao Yuan shook his head, and said, Lin Pavilion is the heart's blood of us apprentice brothers, and I definitely cannot allow it to collapse. Ho ho, then there is nothing else to be said. Liang Jinbo stretched out his hand. Come compete, then. Please. Liang Jinbo paused for a moment, and then said, since the challenge has come from our side, and furthermore, I am a great many years older than you, so I can be considered half a senior, let me then decide what kind of alchemical pill we should concoct. There was a lot of space in this. That was because though alchemical pills might be both in level 5, there was still a difference of difficulty level. The person who chose first would be at a slight disadvantage, and the person who chose afterward could calmly decide, and make adjustments according to his own abilities. Kang Xiao Yuan was not stubborn, and the other party had indeed been embroiled in alchemy tens of thousands of years more than him, so he wasn't taking too much advantage of him here. I will concoct the 4 directions pill, Liang Jinbo finally said in a deep voice after a moment of consideration. Kang Xiao Yuan was slightly surprised internally. The 4 directions pill was one of the more challenging alchemical pills among level 5 alchemical pills. Then, if he wanted to defeat his opponent, he would have to choose a more difficult one. Of course, he could also choose a simpler one, and then hope that Liang Jinbo would make an error and cause his alchemical pill to explode. Then, he would only have to concoct a level 5 alchemical pill, and it would be his win. But if his opponent was not confident, would he say that he would be concocting the 4 directions pill at a time like this? He paused for a while, and then said, "Then I, too, shall concoct the 4 directions pill." Both of them were concocting the 4 directions pill, so it would be even simpler to compare. Whoever had the cauldron that contained more successfully concocted alchemical pills would naturally be the victor, and if the number was the same, they could still compare the quality of the pills. Then, let's begin. Both began to first prepare their ingredients. The Treasure Forest Pavilion had come prepared, so they naturally brought ingredients with them, and Kang Xiao Yuan was the owner of this place, so he was naturally extremely fast in picking out his ingredients as well. Not long afterwards, the two of them both said, "Begin," and began to concoct their alchemical pills. Separating and purifying the ingredients, and then starting the fire. The two soon entered into the most important process of alchemy. Ling Han merely took a look, and then shook his head. With his judgment as the alchemy emperor, he could already discern that Kang Xiao Yuan was no match for Liang Jinbo. Kang Xiao Yuan's talent in alchemy was indeed not inferior to the others, and even surpassed him. However, the latter had stayed on the level of level 5 alchemist 100,000 years longer than him, and this was a very, very big gap. A thought flashed in Ling Han's head, and he walked towards Yun Yongwang. "Stop right there." When they saw a young man so boldly walk over, the people from the Lin Pavilion hurriedly blocked him from passing. Yun Yongwang looked over when he heard the commotion. He looked Ling Han in the eyes for a while before he softly issued a sound in surprise, and asked, "Have we met before?" This man's gaze actually gave him a familiar feeling. Furthermore, those eyes contained too much and too complicated emotions. Ling Han lowered his eyes slightly, and then smiled as he asked, "I would like to join the Lin Pavilion. Is that all right?" Yin Yongwang was surprised this young man actually wanted to join the Lin Pavilion. Couldn't he see that the Lin Pavilion was presently in dire straits? And he actually still wanted to join? Strange. He asked, "You are an alchemist as well?" Ling Han cracked a smile, and said, "I have learned a few years." "Just a few years?" Yin Yongwang paused for a while, yet nodded, and said, "All right." A friend in need was a friend indeed. Ling Han actually wanted to join the Lin Pavilion at this time, like he was providing help in their hour of need, giving him much comfort. Thus, whatever Ling Han's abilities in alchemy, he would accept his kindly intentions. "Young man, how should I address you?" he asked further. "Ling Han." "What?" Yin Yongwang exclaimed in spite of himself, and almost jumped up. This person actually shared the same name as his master who had passed away. Previously, he had felt as if Ling Han was familiar to him, and now added with this name, ripples involuntarily rose up in his heart. Unfortunately, no matter how he looked, he did not discover what similarities this Ling Han in front of him had with his master. Moreover, before he had headed to the immortal realm, his master had already vanished for a few hundred years. He should have indeed died. It is probably just a coincidence, he thought. Yin Yongwang could not help but ask, "Ling Han, where are you from?" "Joint Peace Planet," Ling Han answered. He did not reveal his identity. Firstly, there were too many eyes and ears here. If he revealed that he had come from the lower realm, then it would very possibly reach the ears of the 5 sects, who would target him ahead of time. Secondly, now that 10,000 years had passed, he did not know if there had been any change in these 2 disciples. This change was referring to the bottom line of good and evil. He had to observe them first. Yin Yongwang was slightly confused. The immortal realm was too big. If they weren't traitors, the majority would stay on a single planet for their whole lives. What more when the Joint Peace Planet was a whole 2 years' journey away from this place at the normal speed of a starship. It could not be more natural that he had not heard of it before. "Oh." He nodded, and showed a hint of disappointment. However, his heart was now at peace. He focused on watching the competition between Liang Jinbo and Kang Xiaoyuan. This involved the future of the Han Lin Pavilion. Chapter 1223, I'll Compete. Ling Han didn't pay much attention to the competition. After all, hadn't he joined the Han Lin Pavilion to step in for Kang Xiaoyuan after he lost? Once the Alchemy Emperor stepped in, could they still lose? Anyhow, the refinement of level 5 divine pills would take around 10 days. Thus, Ling Han left to look for Feng Peyun and the others. He couldn't waste his time. Moreover, he had to mull over how he was going to explain his other identity to them. In the end, he decided to put that aside first. His explanation could wait until after he revealed his true identity to Kang Xiaoyuan and the others. After 8 days, Ling Han returned to the Han Lin Pavilion. The competition between Kang Xiaoyuan and Liang Jinbo was already reaching its final stages. However, once an alchemist began pill refinement, completing 1% and completing 99% would be the same. Alchemists couldn't become distracted or make any mistakes. Otherwise, all of their previous efforts would count for nothing. Thus, alchemists would become increasingly serious the closer they were to completion. After several hours, Kang Xiaoyuan and Liang Jinbo both stopped at almost exactly the same moment. "Open," the two have shouted as they slapped the lid of their cauldron each. They were about to remove the lid of their cauldron. However, Kang Xiaoyuan tapped the cauldron with both of his hands, causing flames to quickly jump over it. This was the three-fire guide, Ling Han's revolutionary innovation. Liang Jinbo was the first to show his cauldron to the audience. There were 3 round alchemical pills in his cauldron, and it seemed as if they were about to fly out. However, they were forcefully suppressed and sealed in the cauldron by Liang Jinbo. Kang Xiaoyuan also tilted his cauldron slightly, saying, "I didn't disappoint you, Brother Liang." There were also 3 alchemical pills inside his cauldron. Kang Xiaoyuan secretly wiped the sweat off his forehead. Had he not raised the quality and success rate of his pills with the 3-fire guide, he would have only been able to refine 2 pills. Right now, he could only pray that his opponent had also only been able to refine 3 pills 1. Otherwise, the loser would definitely be him. "You've both refined 3 pills. Okay, then let's compare their quality." They both poured their pills into their palms before placing them together. Alchemists like them could determine the quality of a pill simply by looking at it and smelling it. Kang Xiaoyuan's expression quickly became gloomy. His opponent's pill was superior to his, both in terms of color and in terms of smell. Moreover, it wasn't superior by just a little bit, it was superior by quite a clear margin. He hesitated briefly before sighing, and saying, "I've lost." "Ha ha ha." Liang Jinbo laughed heartily. The Han Lin Pavilion had suffered a resounding defeat in this competition. As the strongest competitor for his side, he naturally felt even more delighted. "No need to feel dispirited," Ling Han suddenly said. "He's more skilled than you because he became a level 5 alchemist long before you. In fact, he's been at this level for tens of thousands of years longer than you. If you practice for a few more years, surpassing him won't be too difficult." Kang Xiaoyuan faltered upon hearing this. He glanced at Ling Han with a look of confusion. Who is this person? Why does he sound so old and mature? His tone is almost like Master's. He had focused his full attention on pill refinement before, and he wouldn't have known even if the sky were to collapse. Thus, he naturally didn't know who Ling Han was. In fact, he didn't even know that Ling Han had already become a member of the Han Lin Pavilion. However, Liang Jinbo was furious upon hearing this. What does he mean? A loss is a loss. Is he trying to find excuses? He humphed coldly, and said, "Are you people unable to accept defeat?" "Defeat?" Ling Han laughed loudly before shaking his head, and saying, "The competition hasn't ended yet. So, what is this defeat that you speak of?" "Hasn't ended yet?" "Hasn't ended your mom. The most powerful alchemist on your side has already competed. What else do you want?" "Hang on." Who is this brat? Where the hell did he come from? Who is this person? Liang Jinbo asked. Brother Kong, Brother Yun, since when did this person become the master of the Han Lin Pavilion? Ling Han waved his hand, and said, I'm a newly hired alchemist of the Han Lin Pavilion. I'll compete against you people in the next round. Are there any level 6 or level 7 alchemists among you? Let them out for a walk. Fuck. Let them out for a walk? Do you think alchemists are dogs? Fucking let them out for a walk. Liang Jinbo fumed upon hearing this. There was a menacing look in his eyes, and he said, Brother Kong, Brother Yun, how long are you going to let this brat muck around for? Kong Xiaoyuan was just about to speak, yet Ling Han suddenly walked over and snatched the 3 pills from his hand. Although he was at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, such cultivation was completely insufficient before Ling Han. If the tiger doesn't roar, you'll think I'm an ill cat. Ling Han tossed the 3 alchemical pills back into the cauldron. He then started to refine them. What? You're tossing refined pills back into the cauldron to temper? Are you fucking retarded? To say nothing of alchemical pills, even forged items couldn't be tossed back into flames to temper if one weren't satisfied. There was martial intent in God tools, and recklessly tempering them would only lead to the destruction of both the martial intent and the God tool. Alchemical pills were much the same. However, instead of having martial intent, they possessed divine patterns that were formed from the intertwining regulations of heaven and earth. Moreover, these divine patterns were even more fragile. Why did alchemists have to be so careful when refining pills? This was because any mistake in intertwining the regulations would cause the entire cauldron of pills to become useless. Kong Xiaoyuan was just about to stop Ling Han, yet he was pulled back Yin Yongwang. Why? He asked in confusion. He's called Ling Han. Yin Yongwang replied. What? Kong Xiaoyuan was stunned. However, he immediately shook his head. This person couldn't be their master. Their master had already been dead for over 10,000 years. However, because of their identical name, he decided to let Ling Han muck around this one time. Ling Han continued his refinement. Flames burned brightly, and after a short while, an astonishing fragrance wafted from the cauldron. This fragrance could be smelled from 5 kilometers away. Huh? The cauldron actually didn't explode. Liang Jinbo was completely stunned. Level 5 divine pills contained a huge amount of energy. Thus, refining them with flames could easily destroy the balance within the pills. Such an imbalance would result in an explosion of energy. If the imbalance weren't serious, it would lead to the explosion of the cauldron. If it were very serious, it would lead to a huge explosion that was as powerful as the full power attack of 10 or even 100 elites at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Similar to the ultimate arrow, this was a concentrated explosion of energy. Thus, its might and power was far above its actual level. Ling Han had foolishly attempted to temper a refined pill, yet the cauldron actually hadn't exploded. This was extremely surprising and strange. The onlookers could barely believe their eyes. Could it be that he didn't put the alchemical pills in? Ling Han was completely focused on the task before him. He was going to elevate the quality of the pills, a task that was extremely difficult even for an alchemy emperor like him. Fortunately, these were only level 5 divine pills. His alchemy skills had already reached level 7, and it was because of this that he had a chance at success. The difficulty of this task was far too high. In fact, it was no easier than refining a cauldron of level 7 divine pills. Thus, even Ling Han had to be extremely careful. He extracted the divine patterns from the divine pills, and continued to fine-tune their intertwinings. Elevating the quality of alchemical pills wasn't equivalent to refining them anew. Thus, doing so wouldn't take a great amount of time. Ling Han stopped after just 2 hours. He had completed the task of elevating the pills' quality. He opened the cauldron and retrieved the pills. He then tossed them toward Liang Jinbo, and said, Ignoramus, do some learning, yeah? Liang Jinbo instinctively caught the pills. He swept his gaze over them, and his expression instantly became one of disbelief. Chapter 12:24. Crawl out of this street. Impossible. Liang Jinbo wore an expression of utter shock. As an alchemy prodigy and someone who was just qualified to be referred to as Grandmaster, he could clearly see that the quality of the 3 pills had increased significantly. Are you a bloody freak? You're actually able to reform already refined pills and elevate their quality? Just how powerful does your divine sense need to be? How deep is your understanding of medicinal ingredients? This is unbelievable. Can level 5 alchemists do this? Kang Xiao Yuan and Yin Yong Wang were also stunned by Ling Han's feat. His accomplishment was far too freakish. Ling Han could definitely crush them. Moreover, Ling Han had been able to snatch the 4 directions pills from Kang Xiao Yuan's hand with ease. This said a lot about his cultivation level. Such a young alchemy and cultivation prodigy was actually willing to join their Han Lin Pavilion? They were dizzy with excitement. This? The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion all dashed over and surrounded Liang Jinbo. They carefully examined the 4 directions pills in his hands. However, they could only reach one conclusion no matter how they examined the pills. The pills that had been modified by Ling Han were far higher in quality than the pills that had been refined by Liang Jinbo. With such a huge difference in quality, even the members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion couldn't bring themselves to deliberately twist the facts and argue about whose pills were better. How is it? Ling Han asked with a smile. Let's continue the competition. The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion all looked at each other. They had known that the most skilled alchemist in the Han Lin Pavilion was only a level 5 alchemist. Thus, there was naturally no level 6 alchemist in their group, let alone a level 7 alchemist. However, Ling Han had succeeded in elevating the quality of a level 5 divine pill, and this signified that his alchemy was definitely above level 5. Who here could compete against him? Heh, who would have thought there was a hidden prodigy in the small Han Lin Pavilion, an elder of the Treasure Forest Pavilion said. His surname was Hu, and people all referred to him as Grandmaster Hu or Alchemist Hu. He was also the leader of the Treasure Forest Pavilion delegation. He calmed his own camp, and also sent someone to report this matter. They had already won 5 matches in a row, and today was a good opportunity to take the Han Lin Pavilion down. How could they fall at the last hurdle? Sir, you are, he asked. Ling Han replied with a smile. Ling Han. Han Lin Pavilion? Alchemist Hu murmured to himself. He found this a bit strange. Was this just a coincidence? He chuckled and said, Grandmaster Ling already has such outstanding alchemy achievements at such a young age. Your future is truly limitless. However, Grandmaster Ling looks a little unfamiliar. Perhaps you've only just joined the Han Lin Pavilion? They had naturally investigated their opponent before coming to challenge them. Thus, they knew the Han Lin Pavilion as well as the palm of their hands. However, the sudden appearance of Ling Han caught them completely off guard. Grandmaster Ling is a newly hired senior elder of my pavilion, Yin Yong Wang immediately said. He naturally had to give Ling Han an authentic identity. Only then would his appearance seem convincing. Oh. Alchemist Hu squinted his eyes as he nodded, and then said, with Grandmaster Ling's abilities, why choose to waste your talent on the measly Han Lin Pavilion? How about you join our Treasure Forest Pavilion? We'll definitely provide you with more opportunities. Fuck. He was trying to steal their senior elder in public. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, with Meth's senior elder present, the Han Lin Pavilion will definitely become the most powerful holy land for alchemists in the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire, Cloud Apex Planet, Long Light Galaxy, and even the entire Immortal Realm. So, how about you join the Han Lin Pavilion? I can give you some tips. Holy motherfucker. How incredibly arrogant. To say nothing of the Treasure Forest Pavilion, even the members of the Han Lin Pavilion started to wipe cold sweat off their foreheads. They could barely maintain their footing in Big Trade City, yet Ling Han was actually dreaming of dominating the entire immortal realm? Was there any need to make such an audacious claim? Meanwhile, Alchemist who grimaced upon hearing Ling Han's words. He was already quite old, and he had studied alchemy for several million years. Even if he divided this time by 10, the number of years he had spent would still be far above what Ling Han had spent. Yet, Ling Han had actually offered to give him tips. How could he tolerate such belittling? Although knowledge didn't care about age, with those capable becoming the masters, Ling Han was still far too young. Moreover, he had only revealed a tiny bit of his skills. That wasn't enough to convince everyone. In the end, he could only say, Grandmaster Ling has such amazing confidence. In any case, Ling Han's performance had proved that he was at least a level 6 alchemist. Alchemy was similar to cultivation in that those at a higher level were referred to as a senior. However, though there were prodigies who could fight above their tier in cultivation, this was impossible in alchemy. The level of an alchemist was determined by the highest level pill they could refine. Thus, there was no notion of competing above one's tier. Since Ling Han's alchemy level was higher than his, alchemist who had to maintain an attitude of respect. Otherwise, he would be frowned upon by fellow alchemists. Meanwhile, Yin Yong Wang and Kang Xiao Yuan smiled happily. They both felt a sense of exaltation. The Treasure Forest Pavilion had started targeting them for no reason, and they had been on the losing end the entire time. Only at this moment did they turn the tables in a brilliant fashion. How could they not be delighted? This kind of sensation was absolutely euphoric. It reminded them of their time in the small world, where they had traveled around with their master. At that time, who didn't beg them to refine pills? Ha 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 ha. Who would have thought that the Lin Pavilion still had an elite? There was a long bout of laughter as a man of around 30 years old walked in. He was dressed in an elegant white robe, and he appeared extremely dashing and confident. It's Grandmaster He. He's Xinyan, and he's referred to as the youngest level 6 alchemist. His future is limitless. Heh, forget about that title. I know at least 10 people who are younger but more talented than Grandmaster He. However, Grandmaster He is indeed an alchemy prodigy. He became a level 5 alchemist 30,000 years ago, yet he was able to surge forward and become a level 6 alchemist 10,000 or so years ago. That's incredible. By playing this trump card, it looks like the Treasure Forest Pavilion wants to crush the Lin Pavilion. Of course. It's already reached this stage, so they definitely have to press home their advantage. But, why do I feel like the Treasure Forest Pavilion is going to lose? Same. This young man seems extremely unpredictable. Perhaps he'll perform a miracle. The onlookers were all engaged in spirited discussions, and there wasn't overwhelming support for Xinyan. Our respects to Grandmaster He. The alchemists of the Treasure Forest Pavilion all bowed toward Xinyan. In this world, power was might. Xinyan raised his hands slightly, and said, "Rise." He then looked at Ling Han, and said, "Sir, you've only just joined the Lin Pavilion, so why embroil yourself in this mess?" Heh. Ling Han replied with an indifferent chuckle. He naturally wouldn't waste his time discussing such nonsense. Anyhow, who would know that Kang Xiao Yuan and Yin Yong Wang were actually his disciples? Moreover, with his protective nature, how could he stand by idly while his disciples were bullied? No way. A menacing look appeared in Xinyan's eyes. He was indeed a prodigious supreme prodigy. Thus, he was extremely conceited, and incredibly prone to becoming jealous. Now that a younger and possibly equally as talented alchemist had appeared, he was naturally filled with displeasure. "I'll compete against you," he said. "However, the loser will have to crawl out of this street." Chapter 1225, Refining the Explosive Thunder Pill. Crawl out of this street. Everyone's expression changed. This wager had gone way too far. Although the Treasure Forest Pavilion had been picking on the Lin Pavilion, they had only targeted the pavilion, not specific individuals. It was simply a competition for business. If the Lin Pavilion couldn't win, that was completely their own fault. However, Xinyan was clearly intending to humiliate Ling Han with this wager. If Ling Han truly crawled out of this street, how could he still show his face in the future? He would definitely have to flee from this city with his tail between his legs. He wouldn't dare set foot in this city ever again. Ling Han's expression became cold. He could accept competition between businesses, yet Xinyan was clearly targeting him with malicious intent. Humph, you're seeking death. Are you sure you want to compete against the Alchemy Emperor? Deal. Ling Han said. You've asked for this yourself. We're refining level 6 divine pills. Xinyan stressed. Judging by Ling Han's qi and blood, he probably had yet to reach 1,000 years old. Thus, he could have only been a level 6 alchemist for a maximum of 1,000 years. With a mere 1,000 years of experience, how many cauldrons of level 6 divine pills could he have refined? How much understanding of level 6 divine pills could he have? However, little did he know that Ling Han was an alchemy emperor. Moreover, he possessed a reincarnation tree that allowed him to complete 1 year's worth of comprehension in 1 day. Ling Han smiled, and said, of course. Seeing as you're a junior, I'll choose my pill first. I'm refining the explosive thunder pill. In reality, this was the only level 6 divine pill he could refine. Thus, he would have chosen it regardless of whether he picked first or second. That being the case, why not flex a bit? Sure enough, his flex impressed many people. They had already said that there was a big difference between choosing first and choosing second. The person who chose second would enjoy the advantage of knowing their opponent's choice and being able to choose accordingly. Explosive thunder pill. Xinyan exclaimed in slight surprise. Among level 6 divine pills, this pill was extremely difficult to refine. Moreover, it was an ancient pill that few people knew the recipe of. Coincidentally, he was one of those few people. Then I'll also choose the explosive thunder pill. Xinyan said confidently. He chuckled coldly in his mind. His opponent definitely didn't know that he had spent a significant amount of time and effort studying the explosive thunder pill. Few people knew how to refine this pill, yet its effects were extraordinary. It could elevate the battle prowess of elites at the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier by 2 stars. Thus, it was incredibly rare and expensive. He would refine a cauldron of explosive thunder pills every once in a while, so he was already able to achieve a success rate of 100%. Moreover, the quality of his pills had steadily improved over time. You're choosing to refine the explosive thunder pill? You're digging a hole for yourself. Okay, we'll begin after preparing the ingredients. Alchemist who announced. Both parties started to prepare their ingredients. However, the members of the Lin Pavilion all wore troubled expressions. They didn't have any level 6 alchemists, so they naturally hadn't prepared any level 6 ingredients. Ling Han smiled and retrieved the ingredients from his black tower. Yin Yong Wang and Kang Xiao Yuan were both moved and confused. Why was Ling Han helping the Lin Pavilion? However, they couldn't push this powerful helper out the door at this moment, regardless of how confused they were. After preparing their ingredients, they both said, "Start," together, marking the beginning of their match. Ling Han's actions seemed especially casual. He had already refined several cauldrons of explosive thunder pills, and he would more so analyze his experiences and make improvements under the reincarnation tree after each session of refinement. With his identity as the Alchemy Emperor and with the help of the reincarnation tree, his skills in refining the explosive thunder pill would improve in leaps and bounds each time he reflected and completed comprehension. Now, he could already refine the explosive thunder pill with extreme ease. On the other hand, Xinyan's actions were extremely cautious and careful. He didn't dare let his attention waver. Beads of sweat rolled down his forehead, and he appeared as tense as could be. The stark contrast between them clearly revealed who was superior. Unless he's faking it, that Ling Han looks far more at ease. If this continues, he'll definitely win the match. Read more chapter on novel full. Haha. Didn't he Xinyan say the loser would have to crawl out of this street? I'm already eager to see that happen. It's not every day you get to see a level 6 alchemist crawling along the street. The onlookers couldn't help but whisper among themselves. They all believed that Ling Han had a greater chance of victory. However, refining a cauldron of level 6 divine pills would take around half a month. Thus, even though Ling Han looked to be in control, the true victor would only be determined in half a month's time. Many people became impatient, and they returned home to eat and sleep. They could simply return in half a month to witness who won. Time crept by, and half a month quickly passed. There was a look of exhaustion on He Jingyan's face. They were refining level 6 divine pills, and intertwining the divine patterns within them required an astonishing amount of concentration and energy. Not only was it taxing on one's divine sense, but it was also taxing on one's origin power. When refining such pills, alchemists usually ingested pills to replenish their origin power as they refined. However, He Jingyan indeed lived up to his name as a prodigy. He didn't ingest a single pill from beginning to end. This wasn't out of conceit, but rather out of fear that he would lose concentration when ingesting those pills. He didn't want to affect the quality of his pills. Refining pills smoothly in one go was naturally the best. However, he was almost about to be sucked dry. After refining this cauldron of pills, he would need to rest for at least 1 month. Meanwhile, Ling Han's condition caused the onlookers to click their tongues and shake their heads in wonder. He still appeared at ease, and there wasn't a bead of sweat on his forehead. The only difference was the extra glimmer in his eyes. Open! He Jingyan shouted as he slapped his cauldron. Pa! The lid of his cauldron flew up, and 3 pills immediately attempted to fly out as if they were trying to escape. He Jingyan was prepared for this, and he grabbed at the pills with his right hand. The 3 pills instantly landed in his palm. A look of satisfaction appeared on his face. In the past, he could only refine 2 pills at most. However, he had performed above par this time, successfully refining 3 pills. Haha. Victory is mine, right? Ling Han also slapped his cauldron. Xiao, xiao, xiao. Like with He Jingyan, several dots of light flew from his cauldron. However, there were clearly more than 3 dots of light. 5 pills. Pooh! The alchemists from the Treasure Forest Pavilion instantly spluttered loudly. Although none of them could refine the explosive thunder pill, this didn't prevent them from knowing that the maximum number of explosive thunder pills per cauldron was 5. In other words, Ling Han had achieved perfection. Pa! The 5 pills landed in Ling Han's palm. He unclasped his hand, and the 5 faint blue pills immediately started to roll about as if they wanted to break free from his grasp and soar into the sky. He Jingyan gritted his teeth, his face becoming a shade of red and a shade of blue. I actually lost? He couldn't accept this. If he lost, he would have to crawl out of this street. How could he show his face in the future? You've indeed refined more pills than me, he shouted. However, we still have to compare the quality of the pills. If your explosive thunder pills only possess a quality of 1 or 2 stars, how can they compare to mine? This wasn't unreasonable. However, successfully refining more pills usually meant that the pills were also of a higher quality. Thus, alchemists would only compare the quality of their pills if they had successfully refined the same number of pills. He Jingyan was clearly unable to accept defeat. Ling Han smiled, and said, sure, then let's appraise the pills. Chapter 1226, Arrival of the Level 7 Alchemist. The appraisal quickly returned a result. Alchemy skills and appraisal skills were 2 different matters. Even level 1 alchemists or non-alchemists, for that matter, could be skilled in appraising alchemical pills. This simply required one to have a good understanding of alchemical pills. Ling Han had achieved a resounding victory. He Jingyan's explosive thunder pills barely reached 6 stars, while Ling Han's reached a whopping 9 stars. It wasn't perfect, but that was because Ling Han hadn't used the 3-fire guide. After all, he didn't want his disciples to guess his identity yet. Xinyan looked completely demoralized. He had lost, and lost in emphatic fashion, no less. The gulf between him and Ling Han was huge. "Please," Ling Han said with a smile. "You've lost, so it's time for you to crawl out of this street." Xinyan humphed before turning around to leave. He was too embarrassed to stay here. "Oi, oi, oi, use all 4 limbs, not just your 2 legs, Ling Han said. Xinyan glanced back, and said in a proud voice, "You want to make me, a level 6 alchemist, crawl out ah." Before he could even finish his sentence, Ling Han had already walked over and lifted him up, forcing him to spread his arms and his legs. He couldn't break free from Ling Han's grip no matter what. He couldn't help but feel shocked. One had to realize that he was at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, which was the same cultivation level as Ling Han's. Yet, he couldn't even resist. "I hate dishonest people the most." Ling Han flung him to the floor, and said, "It was your own suggestion, so you've got to abide by it even if it means eating sh*t. If you dare to touch even a single hair of mine, believe me, the Treasure Forest Pavilion will crush you into pieces." Xinyan said in a threatening voice. If he had to crawl on the street in public, that would be humiliating not just for himself, but also for the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Ling Han chuckled, and said, "Oh no, I'm so scared." He then kicked Xinyan, and shouted, "Crawl." Xinyan obviously wasn't willing to do so. If he crawled, he really wouldn't be able to show his face anymore. "What the fuck are you? Are your promises farts from your mouth?" Ling Han continued to stomp on Xinyan's face as he spoke. However, Xinyan finally became tough for once, sticking his head between the cracked tiles in the floor. He was going to cower from Ling Han's attacks. Although having his face stomped on wasn't anything glorious, it was at least still better than crawling along the street in public. "Grandmaster Ling, it's about time you stopped," Alchemist Hu and the others said in persuasion. Ling Han smiled, and said, "Fine. Which of you is going to crawl out of the street for him? I'll let him go if any of you volunteer." The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion all exchanged a glance. They then shook their heads in unison. What a joke! Xinyan cared about face, so why wouldn't they care about face too? Hurry up and call for reinforcements. They attempted to keep Ling Han in check as they waited for the Treasure Forest Pavilion's reinforcements. Ling Han didn't mind this. Even if Xinyan didn't crawl out of this street, he would still lose all face after being stomped on by him. After a while, the reinforcements from the Treasure Forest Pavilion finally arrived. "Stop," a cultivator shouted. There wasn't a hint of medicinal smell on his body, so he definitely wasn't an alchemist. 2 complete suns and moons materialized behind him, signifying that he was at the peak stage of the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. "Fine," Ling Han answered cooperatively. However, he continued to stomp on Xinyan aggressively. "I told you to keep your hands off him," the elite shouted in rage. He reached over and grabbed at Ling Han. Ling Han swung his fist in reply, smiling, and said, "I did keep my hands off him. However, you didn't tell me to keep my feet off him." Pung! Their strikes collided, and Ling Han suddenly sunk down. His power was on par with the late stage of the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, though this was still 10 times weaker than the peak stage. However, his physique was incredibly powerful, so he was completely unaffected by the strike. Meanwhile, his foot was still resting on Xinyan's body. The force of their strikes instantly coursed through him and traveled into Xinyan's body. Pa, pa, pa. The tiles on the floor exploded into smithereens, and Xinyan's body instantly disappeared underground. Even his shadow couldn't be seen. "You!" The elite flared up in rage. He was a protection officer at the Treasure Forest Pavilion, and although his strength wasn't in the top echelon, he should have still been able to crush Ling Han, who was only at the early stage of the Sun-Moon tier. However, the reality was completely different from his expectations. Heh, want to come again? Ling Han said as he swept his gaze around. This elite wasn't the only backup that had come. Among the reinforcements from the Treasure Forest Pavilion, there were also several alchemists who had clearly been involved in alchemy for too long. In fact, the medicinal smell on their bodies could even be seen. This medicinal smell formed an aura that steamed behind their bodies, much like a dense mist. Young lad, you're not going to tell me that you're a level 7 alchemist, right? An elder said with a humph. There was a disbelieving look in his eyes. Although Big Trade City was very large, it was only a small city from the perspective of the entire Imperial Empire. This was evident when looking at the surrounding forces. The most powerful force near the city, the Cloud Phoenix sect, merely had an elite at the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier. Thus, the most skillful alchemist assigned to this Treasure Forest Pavilion branch was only a level 7 alchemist. Level 8 alchemists would occasionally come here to refine some pills depending on the branch's needs. After all, there were only a few elites at the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier in this place, so there was no need to refine too many level 8 divine pills. If they refined too many, whom would they sell them to? This elder's surname was Li, and he was one of the 3 level 7 alchemists who remained stationed at this Treasure Forest Pavilion branch. He had already stagnated at this level for almost 2 million years, and it was extremely likely that he would never become a level 8 alchemist. However, he was very senior, so he was naturally very conceited. Right now, it was possible that this young lad who was heaven knew how much younger than him was a level 7 alchemist. How could he not be jealous? Ling Han chuckled in scorn and said, "Old geezer, all your years of experience may as well have been wasted on a dog. You're unable to improve, yet you're becoming jealous of others. This is very bad. You." Alchemist Li almost exploded in anger, and chided, "You have no respect for your elders. Despicable. No respect?" Ling Han shook his head, and said, "We're all level 7 alchemists, so how is there any notion of seniority relevant? Respect is earned, not demanded. Fine, this elder will have a match with you." Alchemist Li roared. He was so furious that even his white hair billowed in the air. It was as if he wanted to swallow Ling Han alive. "As you wish." Ling Han nodded, and asked, "Do you want to bet anything?" He looked at Xinyan was still under his food as he asked this. A string of curses raced through Xinyan's mind. Alchemist Li humphed, and said, "If you lose, immediately piss off out of Big Trade City forever." "Fine. If you lose, then please piss off out as well," Ling Han said calmly. "Grandmaster Li." The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion hurriedly urged him to rethink his wager. This young man was far too freakish, and his skills were especially profound. Making such a wager was far too rash. "Humph, you people don't trust my skills?" Alchemist Li asked. There was a look of intense displeasure on his face as he glanced at the others. The people from the Treasure Forest Pavilion all wiped the sweat off their forehead. They had all witnessed Ling Han's abilities before, and this young man couldn't be judged according to his appearance and age. His alchemy skills were simply unfathomable. "If you're defeated, won't you lose all face? Brat, show me what you've got. Today, I'll let you know the importance of age and experience." Alchemist Li started to provoke Ling Han. Ling Han grinned, and said, "Seeing as you're so old, I'll choose my pill first. I'm going to refine the spiritual rain bone developing pill." "Pooh." Alchemist Li instantly spluttered loudly. Chapter 1227, Victory Again. The spiritual rain bone developing pill was definitely one of the top level 7 divine pills, both in terms of medicinal effects and in terms of refinement difficulty. Alchemist Li didn't know how to refine it. The Treasure Forest Pavilion was extremely influential, and elders like Alchemist Li could also be regarded as extremely loyal. Thus, he naturally had the trust of the Treasure Forest Pavilion. As long as the level was right, the Treasure Forest Pavilion would unconditionally provide him with whatever pill recipe he wanted to learn. The spiritual rain bone developing pill was an ancient recipe, yet the Treasure Forest Pavilion still possessed a copy. Alchemist Li had also studied it, though he had failed to refine it even after several hundred attempts. After so many failures, he didn't dare to refine it again. He couldn't afford so many failures. Alchemists were indeed rich, but level 7 ingredients also cost money, right? Not only did they cost money, but they were expensive beyond belief. He really wanted to stand his ground and announce that he was also going to refine the spiritual rain bone developing pill. However, he truly had no confidence. His expression became solemn. If Ling Han genuinely succeeded in refining the spiritual rain bone developing pill, it wouldn't matter what pill he refined, nor would it matter how perfect his result was. There would only be one possibility: defeat. Impossible. I don't believe it. How can this brat surpass me in alchemy? If he does, won't my 2 million years of experience have been completely wasted? I'll refine the 4 clouds 4 rising pill. This was the most difficult level 7 divine pill that he could refine. Although it was inferior to the spiritual rain bone developing pill, at least it wasn't so inferior that he would appear weak. They prepared their ingredients, and then started to refine. Meanwhile, Xinyan had already been dug out from the ground. His face was colorful with blood and dirt. Logically speaking, he should have left after suffering such great humiliation. Otherwise, just being glanced at would be utterly humiliating. However, he didn't want to leave. He wanted to personally witness this alchemy match. He wanted to see Ling Han lose. However, he noticed that something was off right away. Ling Han appeared much more relaxed than Alchemist Li. One had to realize that the spiritual rain bone developing pill was more difficult to refine than the 4 clouds 4 rising pill, yet Ling Han actually appeared more relaxed. What did this signify? This signified that they were on 2 completely different levels. It was a shame that Alchemist Li couldn't see this. After all, he couldn't let his attention waver a single bit. The 4 clouds 4 rising pill was the most difficult pill that he could refine. However, he couldn't guarantee a 100% success rate when refining this pill. Thus, he was naturally extremely careful and focused. Level 7 divine pills took even longer to refine. 20 days was a minimum. Meanwhile, level 8 divine pills would require a minimum of 1 month to refine. The onlookers went about their own businesses again. Apart from the members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion and Lin Pavilion, the other people all returned to their daily lives. It wouldn't be too late if they came back in a fortnight or so. However, Alchemist Li's refinement failed after just 16 days. His cauldron exploded. Pung! There was a heavy crack as his cauldron exploded. Fortunately, the explosion wasn't violent. There was no other damage apart from his cauldron exploding. If the explosion had been more serious, it was entirely possible that more than half of the people present would have been injured or killed. The old man was disconsolate. His cauldron had actually exploded. Right now, he could only hope that Ling Han's cauldron would also explode. Otherwise, Ling Han would win as long as he successfully refined his pills. Several days passed, and Ling Han finally stopped refining. He slapped the cauldron lid heavily. Pung! There was a soft clang, and 3 alchemical pills flew into the air. They were shrouded in a brilliant divine light. He had succeeded. Alchemist Li instantly slumped to the ground. His opponent had actually refined the spiritual rain bone developing pill. Even if he hadn't failed, he would have still had to admit defeat. Moreover, his opponent hadn't just succeeded, he had concocted a whopping 3 pills. This was terrifying. Ling Han grabbed the 3 spiritual rain bone developing pills with a smile, and said, "Alchemist Li, do you want to examine them?" "And no, it's fine." Alchemist Li stammered dejectedly. He had personally witnessed Ling Han's refinement during the last few days. His smooth and experienced movements had been especially pleasing to the eye. His alchemy skills were definitely miles ahead of his. He picked himself up and pushed the onlookers aside as he left. His figure appeared frail and forlorn. Read more chapter on novel full. Everyone sighed upon seeing this. This was a level 7 alchemist. The alchemists of the Treasure Forest Pavilion hurriedly chased after him, trying to console him and raise his spirits. Was there any need to take this loss so seriously? Alchemist Li smiled, and said, "A promise is a promise. I'll never return to Big Trade City again. However, I only said that I would leave the Big Trade City. I never said that I would leave the Treasure Forest Pavilion. So, it's entirely fine for me to go to a branch in some other city." Fuck. Everyone grimaced upon hearing this. Sure enough, experience came with age. After all this commotion, he was still a member of the Treasure Forest Pavilion. It was just that he would have to head to another branch. However, did alchemists care where they refined pills? Anyhow, being forced out of Big Trade City was still a stain on his name. The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion all left in shame. They had achieved emphatic victories in the beginning, yet they had suffered 2 resounding defeats in the end. They couldn't invite a level 8 alchemist at the moment, so retreating was naturally their only option. Staying here would merely be asking for more humiliation. This was an alchemy competition, so the Treasure Forest Pavilion couldn't act wantonly even if they possessed numerous very powerful elites. After all, some rules had to be followed. Our respects to Grandmaster Ling. Yin Yong Wang, Kang Xiu Yuan, and the other members of the Han Lin Pavilion all bowed respectfully to Ling Han. Their expressions were full of respect and veneration. Ling Han was young, yet his alchemy skills were clear for all to see. Was a level 7 alchemist not impressive? In any case, Ling Han deserved this level of respect. Yin Yong Wang and Kang Xiu Yuan were his disciples anyway, so it was only natural that they bowed to him. He casually raised a hand, and said, "Rise." Yin Yong Wang and Kang Xiu Yuan invited Ling Han into the interior of the pavilion. The exterior would naturally be cleaned up by others. Meanwhile, the alchemy competition had attracted many customers to the Han Lin Pavilion, causing their business to go up explosively. "Grandmaster, may I ask why you helped us?" Yin Yong Wang and Kang Xiu Yuan asked curiously. With Ling Han's alchemy skill, he could have easily entered the Treasure Forest Pavilion and mapped out a brighter future. So, why did he insist on joining their relatively weak pavilion? In fact, he was even willing to offend the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Ling Han drank some tea, and then replied, "I'm deeply acquainted with your master." Yin Yong Wang and Kang Xiu Yuan exchanged a glance. They didn't understand what he meant by deeply acquainted. One had to realize that they had arrived in the immortal realm 10,000 years ago. Moreover, it was clear that no one else from the lower realm could ascend to the immortal realm. Those who had ascended were all members of the 5 sects. "I ascended from the lower realm a few years ago," Ling Han said. He decided to divulge a bit of his secret. "What?" Yin Yong Wang and Kang Xiu Yuan both jumped up at the same time. Their minds were numb with shock. Lower realm. He's actually from the lower realm. Kang Xiu Yuan shook his head in disbelief, and exclaimed, "How is that possible? Who doesn't know that the lower realm is controlled by the 5 sects? Even shattering void tier elites will be killed by the large formation set by the 5 sects if they try to shatter the void, to say nothing of opening the sky." Opening the sky meant that one had to shatter the restrictions set by the 5 sects. Was this possible? Ling Han cracked a smile, and said, "Nothing in the world is impossible." So what if they're the 5 sects? Can they blot out the heaven with one hand and act as they please? Is this real? Yin Yong Wang and Kang Xiu Yuan looked at each other. They felt as if the efforts of them 3 brothers over the past 10,000 years had all been for nothing. Chapter 12:28, Freeloading Some Heavenly Tribulation. After arriving in the immortal realm, Yin Yong Wang, Kang Xiu Yuan, and Shenrui Jing had never forgotten about the lower realm. They had worked extremely hard in these past 10,000 years, and they hoped that there would come a day where they could destroy the 5 sects and free the billions of beings in the lower realm. Right now, 2 of them had already become level 5 alchemists. Meanwhile, Chen Ruijing had put his focus on cultivation, and already advanced to the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. At this rate, perhaps they would be powerful enough to oppose the 5 sects in 1,000,000 years or so. Destroying the 5 sects was their motivation, it was their lifelong goal. However, someone was suddenly telling them that they had already opened the sky and allowed the lower realm to ascend into the immortal realm. This plunged them into a state of existential confusion. Fuck, what should we do in the future? Then what about the 5 sects in the lower realm? Kang Xiao Yuan asked with a dazed expression. Ling Han smiled, and replied, they've been annihilated, of course. Annihilated. How domineering. Kang Xiao Yuan and Yin Yong Wang were both incredulous. The lower realm opening the sky and ascending to the immortal realm was such a significant turn of events, so why would the 5 sects keep their mouths shut? However, the more they thought about this, the more it made sense. Perhaps this news was only limited to the upper tiers of the 5 sects. That being the case, how could outsiders like them know about it? After all, if news got out that the 5 sects were refining the beings of an entire realm into a pill, could they escape the fate of being annihilated? There was a strange feeling in their minds as they looked at Ling Han. Not only was this young man supremely talented in alchemy, but he had also come from the lower realm. Moreover, his name was Ling Han. Their minds couldn't help but wander to their late master. However, 10,000 had already passed. Even if Ling Han their master hadn't died, and even if he had advanced to the Shattering Void tier, how could he have survived for 10,000 years? How could he have opened the sky a few years ago? This had to be a coincidence. They both had the same name, and they both happened to be alchemy prodigies. Kang Xiao Yuan changed the topic, asking, senior elder, how much compensation should we give you? He was a level 7 alchemist. Compared to him, the Lin Pavilion was far too small and insignificant. Ling Han smiled and said, when I refine pills in the future, sell them without charging me a selling fee. Kang Xiao Yuan and Yin Yong Wang were both astonished. This was far too beneficial to them. Having a level 7 alchemist sell his alchemical pills in their store would greatly increase the Lin Pavilion's reputation and fame. This was incredibly beneficial to them, even if they didn't charge a selling fee. He was giving them all the benefits. Sure, there were generous people in the world. However, this person was far too generous. He was so generous that they could barely bring themselves to believe it. They asked some subtle questions, and tried to figure out his true identity. However, Ling Han still wanted to observe this place for a little longer, so he naturally didn't reveal anything else. He kept his 2 disciples in the dark. Meanwhile, Feng Peiyun, Helian Tianyun, Mu Rongqing, and Ding Ping had already set off to gather information about the 5 sects. While they were at it, they would also search for the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. 10,000 years had already passed, and people would change. Anyhow, prodigies like them would experience the greatest amount of growth through actual battles. Solely focusing on cultivation would only hinder their progress. In the Black Tower, Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiao finally completed their accumulation. They were going to break through to the immortal level. Ling Han brought them to some place outside the city. They endured their heavenly tribulation, and Ling Han also freeloaded on their tribulation. Half a day passed, and Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiao both looked like they had turned into burnt charcoal. If it hadn't been for Ling Han's life-saving pills, they definitely would have died. Now, however, they had finally reached the immortal level. In their eyes, this was a miracle. They had actually become immortal level elites. Meanwhile, as someone who had freeloaded on heavenly tribulation, Ling Han's resulting tribulation was naturally formed according to his own tier. Ling Han's hair wasn't disheveled at all. He had studied the secrets of heaven and earth while enduring the heavenly tribulation, and he had turned these secrets into his own power. He unclasped his hand. Wang! Devastating arcs of lightning flashed through the air. This lightning certainly wasn't the same as the lightning of ordinary lightning element cultivators. Ling Han's lightning was filled with a domineering might and a rhythm of Tao. Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, after freeloading on several tribulations, I've finally grasped a shred of heaven's might. The divine demon sword danced above his head. As Ling Han's god tool, the divine demon sword was naturally marked with the same martial intent as him. Thus, it also possessed a shred of heaven's might. If he unleashed the divine demon sword at this moment, perhaps ordinary elites at the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier would all fall to their knees. Perhaps they would submit to the power of heaven's might. Zhu Wujiao and Guang Yuan both kneeled to Ling Han, and said, "Thank you for your help, young Master Han." If it weren't for Ling Han, the limit of their cultivation would have been the spiritual ocean tier. They wouldn't have been able to surpass this tier. Moreover, if they hadn't followed Ling Han, they would still be ordinary people in the great Ling Empire, even if they had ascended to the immortal level. Coming across Ling Han was the best thing in their lives. Meanwhile, them choosing to follow him was the best decision in their lives. Otherwise, why were there only 4 followers by Ling Han's side? Ling Han waved his hand and signaled for the 2 of them to rise. There was no need for them to return to the Black Tower anymore. They could walk their own paths now. He could hasten their progress, yet he had to control how much he did so. By forcefully dragging the level of 2 people who were slightly above ordinary to the mountain river tier, he had pretty much squeezed out their full potential. In fact, he might have exhausted their potential. If he tried to improve their cultivation any more, even an unlimited number of alchemical pills would be useless. They would simply be killed by heavenly tribulation. After returning to Big Trade City, Zhu Wujiao and Guang Yuan took turns being stationed at the Lin Pavilion as representatives of Ling Han. They would notify Ling Han if there were any important matters. Meanwhile, Ling Han studied the Berserk Blood Spirit pill. He would rake in even more wealth if he could refine this pill. Qin Yi and Yuansheng he also left Big Trade City. They headed to the vast mountain ranges outside the Big Trade City, where they would battle against bandits and improve their combat skills. They had stayed in the Black Tower for far too long, and if they didn't gain any battle experience, it was possible that they would become negative star idiots like Hu Feiyan. In this peaceful environment, Ling Han continued to study the Berserk Blood Spirit pill. Theoretically speaking, level 8 divine pills were the limit of what Sun-Moon tier elites could refine. However, one's cultivation level wasn't a reflection of their alchemy level. Perhaps a level 7 alchemist would only be at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, while an elite at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier could only become a level 1 alchemist. One's cultivation level simply determined the limit of their alchemy level. After all, alchemy required one to have a powerful divine sense as well as control over powerful flames. Ling Han had already reached the Sun-Moon tier, and thus the highest level of pill he could refine was level 8 divine pills. Moreover, with a divine sense as powerful as his, perhaps he could even refine level 9 divine pills when he reached the peak stage of the Sun-Moon tier. Treasure Forest Pavilion. Oh. The Lin Pavilion actually has an alchemy prodigy who defeated Alchemist Li? The person who spoke was a shapely woman. She sat with her legs crossed, and her split dress revealed one of her long and pale legs. It was especially slender, and it was as smooth as jade. Her voice was sweet and enchanting, and those who were present all felt an itch in their hearts. However, upon remembering her status, none of them dared to let their feelings show. They simply answered her question with a respectful yes. She was the person in charge of the Treasure Forest Pavilion's Big Trade City branch. Her name was Lin Yuqi, and she had only been here for less than 3 months. According to rumors, Lin Yuqi was the lover of some great elite in the headquarters of the Treasure Forest Pavilion. However, that person's wife couldn't tolerate her, so she was assigned to this branch to escape her wrath. Who dared to have any improper thoughts about her? Chapter 1229, Level 8. Lin Yuqi looked around the room, and those present all remained silent. This woman had a lofty status, so no one dared to talk back to her. It was frightening to even take an extra glance at her. This wasn't because she was ugly, but rather because she was too seductive and beautiful. They were afraid that they wouldn't be able to control themselves. If they lost control, they would die before they even knew it. Milady, our business has fallen by at least 20%. The Lin Pavilion has stolen these customers, a protection officer said. Lin Yuchi, who was resting lazily on a chair, said, "It's already been so many days. Haven't you people devised a solution yet?" Milady, we lost all of the high-level alchemy matches, and as a result, many customers lost confidence in us. If we want to turn the tables, we must defeat the Lin Pavilion in alchemy, an old alchemist said. Although alchemists enjoyed a transcendent standing, how could beings of this world break free from the lure of fame and riches? Lin Yuchi had a powerful background, and thus even the alchemists treated her with utmost respect. Lin Yuchi waved her hand, and said, "Enough with the nonsense. Where's my solution?" She appeared especially annoyed. "There are two solutions," the old alchemist said. He paused for a moment before continuing. Number 1. The Lin Pavilion is completely reliant on the alchemist called Ling Han. If we can convince him to join us, the Lin Pavilion will naturally be put back in their place. Lin Yuchi nodded, and asked, "What about the second solution?" "That Ling Han claims to be a level 7 alchemist. If we can enlist the help of a level 8 alchemist to have a match with him, we'll definitely achieve victory, regardless of whether they refine level 7 divine pills or level 8 divine pills. However, we don't have level 8 alchemists permanently stationed at our pavilion. Even if we immediately ask for help now, it'll still take them 2 to 3 months to reach our city. If they get delayed, it might take even longer." Ling Yuchi pondered for a moment before saying, "We'll try both solutions at once. We'll persuade Ling Han to join us first, and if he obediently accepts, that will naturally be the best. However, if he isn't willing to join, we'll have no choice but to suppress him." "Understood," the old alchemist said with a nod. Lin Yuchi hesitated for a moment, and then said, "It seems like that Ling Han is fairly skilled in alchemy. So, there's no harm in promising him more benefits. Treat him as if he's a level 8 alchemist." "Understood." The old alchemist nodded in understanding. He believed that Ling Han would definitely accept their offer, unless he was retarded. However, much to his disbelief, he was shooed away by Ling Han's 2 followers before he even got to see Ling Han. He reported this to Lin Yuchi, and the seductive beauty naturally became infuriated. She demanded that they get a level 8 alchemist over as soon as possible. She was going to crush Ling Han once and for all. Unfortunately for them, the level 8 alchemist was in seclusion at this moment. He had apparently obtained an ancient pill recipe, and he had placed all of his attention on studying it. Thus, he couldn't come to the big trade city anytime soon. The Treasure Forest Pavilion couldn't do anything about this, and they could only sit by idly as they watched the Lin Pavilion grow. However, that alchemist would definitely come out from seclusion in half a year at most, regardless of whether he mastered the pill recipe or not. After all, he had to take a breather from time to time. When that time came, someone would naturally tell him the news, and request that he come over to defeat Ling Han. Meanwhile, Ling Han had also entered seclusion to study the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill. This kind of pill had been called the saintly pill of the Sun-Moon tier during ancient times. Not only did it have astonishing effects, but it was also tremendously hard to refine. Extracting the divine patterns from medicine and intertwining them together was almost as difficult as refining lower-grade level 9 divine pills. Half a year passed, and Ling Han finally managed to understand all of the steps and procedures. Now, it was time to put everything into practice. Ling Han's heart throbbed slightly. This was because he definitely wouldn't succeed in one go. However, each failure would mean wasting 1 Red Rain Divine King fruit. This represented the loss of 1 sub-minor level of the Sun-Moon tier. However, it would be an even bigger waste if he didn't attempt to refine the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill. As valuable as the Red Rain Divine King fruits were, they only represented wealth, not power. He began his attempts. Failure. 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 Level 8 divine pills were indeed very difficult to refine. Even though Ling Han already understood all of the steps and procedures, as well as the intertwining of the divine patterns, she had comprehended these under the reincarnation tree, which meant that he had spent over 100 years familiarizing himself with these. He still made mistakes when he refined the pills in real life. Understanding and putting to practice were two very different concepts. Ling Han's heart throbbed. The Red Rain Divine King fruits continued to decrease, going from an initial 129 to the current 87. This revealed just how many times he had failed. Only when the Red Rain Divine King fruits decreased to 46 did he finally succeed in refining a cauldron of Berserk Blood Spirit pill. However, there was only one pill. This wasn't due to his ability. In fact, one could only refine one Berserk Blood Spirit pill per cauldron. The only difference would be in terms of quality. There couldn't be any difference in the number of pills. Success. I've finally succeeded. Ling Han laughed in delight. He wasn't in a hurry to ingest this pill. Instead, he immediately sat down cross-legged, and began to reflect on the mistakes that he had made during refinement. In fact, it was exactly because of this habit that his alchemy skills were able to improve in leaps and bounds. With the help of the reincarnation tree, he naturally improved even faster. 2 days passed, and he completed his session of reflection. He continued to refine the Berserk Blood Spirit pill. He succeeded again, and this time, the quality of the pill was slightly higher. A smile spread across Ling Han's face. If he could ingest these Berserk Blood Spirit pills one after another, his cultivation level would rapidly advance by 2 sub-minor levels. Along with it, his battle prowess would also be elevated by 2 stars. However, a Berserk Blood Spirit pill would take 3 days to digest. Ling Han realized that he had already remained secluded for a long time, so he decided to head out to check on the current situation. He exited the Black Tower. Just as he opened the door of his room, he saw Zhu Wujiu run over. There was a look of delight on his face, and he said, "Young Master Han, you've finally come out of seclusion. What's wrong?" The Treasure Forest Pavilion has written another notice of battle. They want to challenge young Master Han, Zhu Wujiu said. He paused for a moment before continuing. The notice of battle was issued a little over 2 months ago. However, young Master Han was in seclusion, so we didn't give them a reply. Right now, everyone's saying that young Master Han is cowering from the challenge. Ling Han couldn't help but chuckle. He'd never took other people's thoughts to heart. After all, he was living for himself, not others. In any case, what could others think about him if he displayed absolute strength? Since that's the case, let's go and answer their challenge. Ling Han headed to the Lin Pavilion. Upon entering, he realized that the number of customers had dwindled considerably. The entire store seemed empty and quiet. Meanwhile, most of the store attendants were walking around aimlessly. There was genuinely nothing for them to do. By the looks of it, Ling Han's cowardice had brought the reputation of the Lin Pavilion crashing down. Few customers visited the store. "Senior Elder, you've finally returned." Yin Yong Wang's and Kang Xiao Yuan's frown finally eased when they saw Ling Han. It was as if they had seen their savior. Ling Han chuckled, and said, "It's always been them challenging us. Let's go to the Treasure Forest Pavilion today and challenge them for a change." Agreed. Yin Yong Wang and Kang Xiao Yuan both nodded in excitement. There was a ball of fire in their bellies. Chapter 1230, Xinyan. However, the Treasure Forest Pavilion has dispatched a level 8 alchemist this time. Moreover, this alchemist is regarded as a genius, Kang Xiao Yuan immediately said. By heading over to challenge the Treasure Forest Pavilion, they were naturally aiming for victory. However, if they ended up being thrashed, that wouldn't be very fun. Level 8 alchemist? Ling Han chuckled to himself. If it were half a year ago, he would have to seriously reconsider his actions. If level 8 alchemists refined level 7 divine pills, their success rate would definitely be higher, and the quality of their pills would also be on another level. He would be confident, but he wouldn't be able to guarantee victory. Now, however, he had already managed to refine the Berserk Blood Spirit pill. The difficulty of refining this pill was close to that of refining level 9 divine pills. So, why would he be afraid of a level 8 alchemist? That's not a problem, Ling Han said. Kang Xiao Yuan and Yang Yong Wang exchanged a glance. They then nodded in understanding. Ling Han was incredibly talented in alchemy, so a level 8 alchemist might not necessarily be able to suppress him if they both refined level 7 divine pills. After a short while, the three of them arrived at the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Compared to the Han Lin Pavilion, the time-honored Treasure Forest Pavilion seemed far more majestic. Just its size alone was 10 times bigger than the Han Lin Pavilion. It didn't seem like an alchemy store at all. Instead, it seemed like a magnificent palace. Due to Ling Han's cowardice, this place had naturally regained its customers and reputation. The flow of customers was almost like a dragon as they streamed in and out of the entrance. It was as if there would never be a quiet moment. Ling Han strode over and shouted, "Ling Han, the Han Lin Pavilion's senior elder, has come to challenge the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Does anyone dare to accept the challenge?" The stream of customers instantly faltered upon hearing this. They all turned around to look at Ling Han. The Han Lin Pavilion is accepting the challenge? It's showtime. It wasn't long before a voice traveled out from the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Grandmaster Ling has cowered like a turtle for so long. Did you finally muster the courage to show your head? Why is there a wild dog barking? Ling Han immediately chided. Why you dare to call me a dog? The person shouted angrily. I simply made a remark. Why did you assume I was talking about you? Ling Han laughed loudly and said, perhaps you're feeling guilty or in the wrong? Is that why you're making connections to yourself every time I mention the word dog? Detestable. Pung. The sound of something shattering traveled out from the palace. It was clear that someone was infuriated. Grandmaster Ling sure is impressive. Your words precede your person. Another old voice traveled over as an old alchemist walked out from the palace. Because of the stairs leading from the path to the palace, the old man instantly had the advantage of height. He looked down at Ling Han. You want to play these tricks on me? Ling Han's body shook, and he instantly transformed into a giant. A powerful aura emanated from his body. This was nothing difficult to achieve. The tables had turned, and now it was he who was looking down on the old alchemist. I've come to accept the challenge. Whom is the Treasure Forest Pavilion dispatching? The old alchemist grimaced and thought to himself, this brat really isn't willing to suffer any loss. He chuckled and said, please wait for a moment, Grandmaster Ling. I'll go and invite Grandmaster Han straight away. He turned around and entered the palace. Meanwhile, Ling Han shrunk back to his normal size. He had simply been messing with the old man. True challenges were won through strength. Let's go, Ling Han said. He immediately walked toward the palace. Kang Xiao Yuan and Yang Yong Wang exchanged a glance before hurriedly catching up. A strange feeling welled up in their minds when they looked at the person in front of them. It was as if they had returned to the lower realm, and were following their master as he defeated alchemist after alchemist, and eventually built his reputation as the Alchemy Emperor. The three of them quickly entered the palace. Their opponents welcomed them with a wall of people who had their arms crossed before their chests. They appeared aggressive and overbearing. Ling Han retrieved a chair from the Black Tower and casually sat down. He made himself feel at home. The people from the Treasure Forest Pavilion were infuriated upon seeing this. How fucking confident are you? You're making it seem as if you're the owner of this place. After a short while, the wall of people suddenly parted, revealing a woman who was followed by a flock of followers. This was an extremely aloof beauty. Her body was shapely and slender, her eyes were bright, and her teeth were white. Her skin was especially smooth and pale, If he were to nitpick, then it would be that her chest was a bit too flat. It wasn't full and impressive enough. You're Ling Han. A hint of scorn and even disgust appeared on her face when she swept her gaze over Ling Han. I'm a level 8 alchemist, so why aren't you paying your respects to me? TSK. How domineering. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, how do you know I'm not a level 9 alchemist? Isn't that nonsense? How can there possibly be a level 9 alchemist as young as you? Do you really think everyone's called Han Xinyan? The aloof beauty was extremely haughty. She was a true alchemy prodigy. She was merely 10,000 years old, yet she was already a level 8 alchemist. It was only due to the limit of her cultivation level, the insufficient power of her divine sense, and the insufficient might of her flames that she hadn't advanced to become a level 9 alchemist yet. Her opponent looked much younger than her, yet he actually wanted to surpass her in alchemy? That was simply impossible. Humph. So be it. Han Xinyan said haughtily. Let's have a match. If you lose, obediently kowtow to me 100 times and admit that you disrespected me. Ling Han smiled, and said, being the gentleman that I am, I won't make you kowtow or whatnot even if you lose. You can simply bring me some tea and admit that I'm better. A cold glint appeared in Han Xinyan's eyes. The arrogance of this junior infuriated her. Alchemy was similar to cultivation in that a gap of one tier was like the gulf between heaven and earth. Yet, this level 7 alchemist actually dared to act arrogantly before a level 8 alchemist. This was incredibly disrespectful. She forcefully suppressed her anger, and said, enough with the nonsense. Let's begin our match. Seeing as you're a junior, I'll choose first. I'll refine the spiritual rain bone developing pill. A wave of commotion swept through the audience when they heard this. Everyone knew that Ling Han had defeated Alchemist Li by successfully refining the spiritual rain bone developing pill. He had single-handedly turned the tables on the Treasure Forest Pavilion. However, Han Xinyan was actually choosing to refine the spiritual rain bone developing pill now. This was a sign of absolute confidence. She was going to defeat her opponent at his own game. How domineering. Ling Han waved his hand, and said, we're not refining level 7 divine pills today. Ha! Don't tell me you want to refine level 6 divine pills? Han Xinyan said with a cold chuckle. No, we're going to refine level 8 divine pills. Ling Han said. The surroundings instantly fell silent. You've got to be joking, right? You personally said that you were a level 7 alchemist. It's only been half a year, yet you're claiming that you can refine a level 8 divine pill now? Who can improve so quickly? Kang Xiao Yuan and Yang Yong Wang were also about to go crazy. If your cauldron explodes the moment you start, won't you attract the ridicule of everyone? Han Xinyan scoffed, and said, are you telling me you can refine level 8 divine pills? Why not? Ling Han retrieved his cauldron, and said, the pill I'm going to refine today is the Berserk Blood Spirit pill. What? Han Xinyan exclaimed in astonishment. Berserk Blood Spirit pill. The recipe for this pill had been lost long, long ago. At least, no one in the Long Light Galaxy could refine this pill. The recipe for this pill was tremendously valuable, and if a genuine Berserk Blood Spirit pill appeared, it would definitely trigger furious competition between buyers. Chapter 1231, Admit I'm Stronger. Is he bluffing? Han Xinyan wasn't sure. The man before her was far too confident. Either he was truly confident, or he was an absolute madman. Fine then, we'll refine level 8 divine pills, she said solemnly. Right now, she was genuinely taking him seriously. She didn't dare to underestimate Ling Han anymore. I'm going to refine the 9 Emperor Golden Bell pill. This was also a level 8 divine pill, but it was inferior to the Berserk Blood Spirit pill both in terms of medicinal effects and in terms of refinement difficulty. After all, the Berserk Blood Spirit pill could almost be regarded as a level 9 divine pill. Thus, regardless of what pill she chose, its refinement difficulty definitely couldn't surpass the Berserk Blood Spirit pill. That being the case, her choice of pill naturally didn't matter too much. As long as Ling Han succeeded in refining the Berserk Blood Spirit pill, he would be crowned the victor, regardless of the quality of his pill. On the flip side, Ling Han would lose if his cauldron exploded and she succeeded in refining her pills. Please. Both of them started to prepare their ingredients. When Ling Han retrieved a red rain divine king fruit, a serious look appeared in Han Xinyan's beautiful eyes. Now that Ling Han had retrieved this kind of divine fruit, it was clear that he wasn't joking. Otherwise, the price of his joke would be far too high. Has he really grasped that ancient recipe? Can he truly refine the Berserk Blood Spirit pill? She found this notion absurd. However, for some reason, she had a slight feeling that Ling Han might succeed. This caused her to become a little discomposed. Our match hasn't even started yet, so why am I predicting my own defeat? The onlookers were all crowded outside the door. Moreover, there was a restriction that stopped their voices from traveling into the palace. This was to prevent them from disturbing the two competitors. Right now, Yin Yongwang and Kang Xiaoyuan could only choose to trust Ling Han, even though they were still unable to accept that he had advanced another level in just half a year. Boom! Divine flames soared into the air as the two young alchemists began to refine their pills. Ling Han quickly entered a trance-like state. Among all the pills he had come across, the Berserk Blood Spirit pill was the most difficult to refine. Moreover, it was the limit of what he could refine. Thus, even he had to be extremely careful. Otherwise, a small mistake would undo all of his previous efforts. The refinement of level 8 divine pills would take an entire month. This tested not only one's patience and determination, but also the strength of one's origin power and divine sense. Refining level 8 divine pills was akin to battling at full power. How many people could battle at full power for an entire month? Any pause would result in their cauldron exploding. Thus, the higher the level, the fewer the alchemists. Ling Han rid his mind of all unnecessary thoughts. This wasn't merely a match. The Berserk Blood Spirit pill was a pill that he needed at this moment, and thus in refining it was both to win the match and to benefit himself. Thus, he naturally had to treat it with utmost seriousness. During this month of refining, the onlookers came and went and came. Apart from alchemists, who had the patience to watch from beginning to end. Anyhow, this was truly a grand feast for alchemists. Witnessing the techniques of two level 8 alchemists was of immense help to them. When the final day arrived, almost everyone in the city squeezed over to witness the final results. Open. Ling Han and Han Xinyan slapped their cauldrons at almost exactly the same time. Pang! The lids of their cauldrons instantly flew up. This time, Ling Han didn't hold back anymore. He activated the 3-fire guide, his most familiar technique. Ah! Yin Yongwang and Kang Xiaoyuan instantly gasped in shock. Their mouths hung so wide open that even an egg could be stuffed in. 3-fire guide. That's definitely the 3-fire guide, they exclaimed in their minds. However, the 3-fire guide was clearly the ultimate technique of their master. Moreover, he had only taught it to them too. Meanwhile, they hadn't gone around teaching it to other people in the lower realm. So, where had Ling Han learned it from? Perhaps, he's master's intergenerational disciple? Xiao! Bringing with it a brilliant glow, a pill soared from Ling Han's cauldron. It danced about in the air. This was the Berserk Blood Spirit pill. He had succeeded. Han Xinyan took a single glance, and sighed in her mind. With her skills, she had known that Ling Han was definitely refining the Berserk Blood Spirit pill just by seeing that there was a red rain divine king fruit among his ingredients. Now that his pill had formed, the result of this match was clear. She had lost, and Ling Han had won. I've lost, she said sincerely. The onlookers were stunned. Who could believe that Ling Han had actually become a level 8 alchemist? Moreover, he had defeated Han Xinyan, a prodigy among prodigies. The members of the Treasure Forest Pavilion were all frozen with shock. They had spent the past half a year waiting for that level 8 alchemist who was studying an ancient pill recipe in seclusion. However, he had remained in seclusion the entire time. Coincidentally, Han Xinyan had come to visit Lin Yuqi. Thus, Lin Yuqi asked for her help to challenge the Han Lin Pavilion. Han Xinyan was a renowned young alchemist, and there were all kinds of titles and feats attributed to her. Simply put, she was a prodigy who was born for alchemy. She was one of the 10 most talented alchemists in the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire. Now, however, she had lost to an even younger alchemist. Unbelievable. This was absolutely unbelievable. Han Xinyan was indeed a proud individual. However, she wasn't one to swallow her words. She immediately brought Ling Han a cup of tea, then used her finger like a sword, and carved, "I admit you're stronger," at his feet. A defeat was a defeat, and she took it on the chin. Ling Han nodded in his mind. This woman had a good character, and she was also extremely talented in alchemy. He felt an urge to take her as his 6th disciple. However, their alchemy level was identical at this moment, and they were also representing opposing forces. If he asked to take her as a disciple, perhaps everyone would roll their eyes in reply. He sipped some tea, and said, "We've completed our match, and I've also drunk my tea. So, farewell." "Wait." Han Xinyan called. She bit her lip, and said, "I'll definitely challenge you again." "Heh, no problem. However, that'll have to wait until when I'm free," Ling Han replied with a smile. He wasn't trying to avoid her challenge. Rather, his main focus was on cultivation, so he couldn't concentrate on alchemy all the time. Ling Han left with Yun Yongwang and Kang Xiaoyuan. The onlookers naturally dispersed as well. However, when the 3 of them arrived back at the Han Lin Pavilion, they immediately discovered that the number of customers had increased 5-fold compared to when they had left. Moreover, this was just the beginning. When they returned to the Han Lin Pavilion, Kang Xiaoyuan couldn't contain himself anymore, and he asked, "Senior Elder, dare I ask, did you use the 3-fire guide just then?" Ling Han grinned, and said, "Correct." Through his observation during the past half a year, in fact, it wasn't his observation, but Guan Yuan's and Zhu Wuzhou's observation determined that these 2 disciples had no relationship with the Cloud Phoenix sect. They most likely hadn't forgotten their roots. "Senior Elder, where did you learn this secret technique?" Yin Yongwang asked. "Where?" A look of reminiscence appeared on Ling Han's face, and he said, "I was the one who invented this technique." "Teng, Teng." Yin Yongwang and Kang Xiaoyuan instantly jumped up, expressions of fury on their face. He actually dared to claim their master's 3-fire guide as his own invention? This was far too shameless. Regardless of how much he had helped the Han Lin Pavilion, there were some things that couldn't be said, and there were some lines that couldn't be crossed. That was about their master was like a deity, like a true immortal. His name definitely couldn't be soiled. "I think it's time for Senior Elder to leave," Yin Yongwang said coldly. Chapter 1232, Ling Family's Widow. Kang Xiaoyuan's expression was also cold. Ling Han had indeed helped the Han Lin Pavilion immensely. However, even if it resulted in the Han Lin Pavilion's immediate collapse, they definitely couldn't let someone who had plagiarized their master remain in their store. This would be a sign of great disrespect to their master. Ling Han laughed loudly. He was extremely satisfied with his disciple's performance. However, he said, "Are you people trying to drive out your benefactor?" "We'll give you the necessary compensation," Kang Xiaoyuan said coldly. "Aren't you afraid that I'll join the Treasure Forest Pavilion?" Ling Han asked. "You two should know. If I join the Treasure Forest Pavilion, this store definitely won't last 10 days. It'll be about time to shut the store and call it a day. Heh, I wonder if you've heard of this phrase, it's better to die with honor than to survive with dishonor. Yin Yong Wang said resolutely. Ling Han clapped his hands, and said, "Is there really any need to take things so far? I simply made a claim. Sir, it's about time you left. We'll send the compensation to your residence in a few days," Kang Xiu Yuan said. His words made it clear that Ling Han wasn't welcome anymore. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "I remember that was a cold winter's day. I was outside a restaurant, and I discovered a freezing child sitting out the front. I ordered a bowl of noodles for him, and he started to follow me from that moment onward. He would follow me no matter where I went." Kang Xiu Yuan involuntarily shuddered. There was a look of disbelief in his eyes as he stared at the man in front of him. That was how he and his master had met. He had been an orphan, and he had almost frozen to death. After receiving a bowl of noodles from Ling Han, he had started to follow him wherever he went. He had tried everything he could to become Ling Han's follower. In the end, Ling Han had been moved by his perseverance, and had finally taken him as a disciple. He hadn't betrayed Ling Han's hopes, either, and he had displayed an outstanding talent in alchemy. From that moment on, he began his journey as an alchemist. He had never told this story to anyone else. "Don't tell me. Don't tell me." Ling Han turned to Yin Yong Wang, and said, "You were the young master of the Yin clan. However, you were dumped by your fiancé, so you came to acknowledge me as your master. You wanted to learn martial arts so that you could return one day and give that woman 2 solid slaps. Unexpectedly, however, your alchemy talent far surpassed your cultivation talent. In the end, you didn't become a cultivation elite, but instead became an alchemy grandmaster. Yong Wang, master still remembers the robe that you once made for me. You made it a size too large, and you ended up being the butt of your 3 brothers' jokes for a good half a year." Master," Yin Yong Wang involuntarily exclaimed. However, he immediately noticed that something was off. How could this person be his master? Ling Han sighed, and said, "Master went to explore an ancient site, yet I ended up being killed. However, my soul managed to survive. 10,000 years later, I was reborn in the body of a youth." Yin Yong Wang and Kang Xiu Yuan exchanged a glance. They were extremely delighted, yet they also found this hard to believe. One had to realize that the reincarnation flower was a precious treasure among precious treasures, even in the immortal realm. Only one reincarnation flower would blossom every 10 billion years. Yet, Ling Han was able to reincarnate in the lower realm? If that were true, his fortune was even better than that of a saint. Should we trust him? Ling Han chuckled, and then started to recount the bits and pieces from their hundreds of years together. Yin Yong Wang and Kang Xiu Yuan became more and more astonished. Although these things weren't secrets, nor were they secret techniques, they were events that only their master and his 4 disciples should have known. Now that they heard these events being recounted by Ling Han, they became more and more convinced that he was genuinely their master. In fact, the most important proof was actually his alchemy skill. Apart from their master, who else could possess such supreme alchemy talent? If he were genuinely their master, advancing 1 level in just half a year wasn't impossible. "Master." Yin Yong Wang and Kang Xiu Yuan both kneeled down, tears streaming down their faces. Ling Han's heart also beat in excitement. He raised a hand, and said, "No need for such formalities. It's been 10,000 years, and Master is pleased to see that you're both safe and sound. I'm also pleased to see that you've both improved in cultivation and alchemy." "Master," tears continued to stream down Yin Yong Wang's and Kang Xiu Yuan's face. They were so emotional that they could barely speak. "That's right, where are your 2 brothers?" Ling Han asked. Out of his 4 disciples, Chen Ruijing was the eldest, Yin Yong Wang was 2nd eldest, Kang Xiu Yuan was 3rd eldest, and the flamboyant Jiang Yufeng was the youngest. Yin Yong Wang's expression changed slightly, and it was as if he were in 2 minds about whether he should speak or not. Ling Han noticed this, and he said, "I know there was some friction between you brothers. I guessed this when I saw the 2 cold spear associations in the lower realm. What on earth happened?" Yin Yongwang and Kang Xiao Yuan exchanged a glance. Yin Yongwang then said, "I'll explain." He paused for a moment to collect his thoughts before saying, "A few hundred years after Master died." He immediately stopped, and there was an awkward expression on his face as he glanced at Ling Han. "Don't worry about it," Ling Han said with a smile. The 5 sects quickly revealed their true colors. They wanted to sacrifice the entire world. At that time, the elites of the world all gathered together to oppose the despicable plan of the 5 sects. However, even though heaven and earth had changed, allowing more elites to appear, the 5 sects had a far greater amount of resources. Not only that, but they had support from the immortal realm. Although we managed to kill a few immortals, we were still emphatically defeated in the end. Meanwhile, the daughter of a powerful figure from the Heaven's Sword Palace had come down to sightsee. However, she actually ended up falling in love with 4th brother. Ah! Ling Han couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. That flamboyant Jiang Yufeng had actually captured the heart of a noble beauty from the immortal realm? This was truly astonishing. Unexpectedly, 4th brother also fell in love with that woman. In fact, he even wanted us to follow him to the immortal realm. However, we naturally rejected him. It was during that time that, us 4 brothers fell out with each other, Yin Yongwang said. We had initially planned to fight to the death in the lower realm. However, Master's wife No, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden took us into the immortal realm. We didn't dare to disobey her. Sure enough, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was already his wife in their minds. Her words were even more authoritative than his. Ling Han shook his head. He hadn't been able to defeat the heavenly phoenix divine maiden at that time. Now, however, he could probably defeat her. "Where is she now?" he asked. There was a hint of emotion in his voice. Although Master's wife. Although the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was born in a small world, her bloodline was supremely powerful. She became a core disciple after returning to the Cloud Phoenix sect, and she advanced to the Sun Moon tier after just 3,000 years. Right now, she's already reached the consummate level of the Sun Moon tier, Kang Xiao Yuan replied. However, she was displeased with her sect's actions, so she announced her retirement after making several great contributions to the sect. Moreover, she calls herself. He paused to look at Ling Han. Ling Han couldn't help but feel annoyed, and he said, "Brat, you dare to leave your master hanging?" Although Kang Xiao Yuan had already lived for so many years, he still chuckled when he heard Ling Han call him a brat. Of course, in terms of relative age, a 10,000-year-old elite at the low extreme of the Sun Moon tier was indeed quite young. "She calls herself the Ling family's widow," he said. Ling Han stroked his chin. That savage woman was actually calling herself his wife. How immodest. However, he liked it. Chapter 1233, Invitation from Milady. Jiang Yufeng was naturally at the Heaven's Sword Palace at this moment. Meanwhile, Chen Ruijing was traveling and adventuring in all kinds of places. He was a cultivator, and thus he needed to seek improvement through battles. As for the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, she was currently living in seclusion in the Water Element Valley, which was around 1,500 kilometers from the Lin Pavilion. Ling Han decided to visit the heavenly phoenix divine maiden straight away. Toppling the 5 sects could wait until later. After all, this would be a relatively long process. However, he had already made this wife wait for 10,000 years, so he didn't want to make her wait for 1 second longer. He exited the Lin Pavilion. Just as he was about to set off, a horse-drawn carriage blocked his path. A woman in azure curtsied at him from within the carriage and said, "Grandmaster Ling, you have an invitation from Milady." "Who?" Ling Han asked in surprise. "Grandmaster Ling, won't you find out once you get on the carriage?" the woman in azure said with a smile. She had a beautiful disposition. Judging by her outfit, she was probably a maid. However, even a maid like her possessed such a captivating charm. Just how beautiful and seductive was her master? Ordinary people would definitely become lost in a boundless world of fantasies, and readily agree to enter the carriage so that they could witness the other lady's appearance. However, Ling Han was in no mood to do such a thing. He shook his head, and said, "I'm fine." He waved his sleeve and strode off into the distance. "Hey, hey, hey." The woman in azure hurriedly jumped off the carriage and blocked Ling Han's path. She puffed her shapely chest out, so much so that it almost touched Ling Han. Ling Han had no option but to take a step back. When women became unreasonable, men really had to be careful. Otherwise, if he were to come into contact with her chest, he would definitely be the one getting blamed for taking advantage of her. Definitely. Grandmaster Ling, Milady is one of the most breathtaking beauties in the world. Heaven knows how many talented men are lining up in the hopes of meeting her. However, whether or not Milady meets them is all up to her mood. The woman in azure seemed especially proud, and she continued, "Right now, Milady is going out of her way to invite you for a meeting, yet you're actually going to turn down her invitation? Aren't you afraid that Milady will feel sad?" "What does that have to do with me?" Ling Han asked indifferently. "You're not allowed to turn her down," the woman in azure said. She reached over to grab Ling Han, and said, "Grandmaster Ling, since you're not willing to get on by yourself, I have no option but to force you on." Boom! A formidable aura surged from her body. She was actually a Sun-Moon tier elite. Ling Han was astonished. A mighty Sun-Moon tier elite was actually working as a maid? However, he naturally wasn't afraid. He clenched his hand into a fist and punched at her. Because he had mastered the lightning sword technique and grasped a wisp of heaven's might, his fist was not only lightning quick, but also extremely destructive. Z. There was a chaotic dance of lightning. The woman in azure was stunned. However, it was already too late for her to pull back, and her slender hand collided with Ling Han's fist. Pung! There was a loud thud, and both of them stumbled back. This woman was at the late stage of the Sun-Moon tier. However, she wasn't a star genius, so her power was on the same level as Ling Han's. Yet, Ling Han had unleashed the power of heavenly tribulation, so the destructive power of his fist was far more astonishing. The slender hand of the woman in azure instantly became red and bloodied. Who would have thought? Grandmaster Ling is actually a cultivation elite as well, the woman in azure exclaimed. She channeled a cultivation technique to stop her blood. There was a hint of surprise on her face, though she wasn't panicked. However, since this is Milady's wish, it's best that Grandmaster Ling obediently complies. Her eyes widened slightly. Wang! 2 suns and moons materialized behind her. However, they radiated an eerie cold, not a brilliant warmth. Ice and snow instantly formed in the surroundings. Suns and moons merely looked like the sun and moon in the sky. However, some people practiced ice element cultivation techniques, and thus their suns and moons naturally radiated with a bone-chilling cold. She had unleashed her suns and moons. Ling Han nodded in his mind. Sure enough, the overall level of cultivation on this planet was higher than on the Joint Peace planet. At least, he had only ever seen Venerable Trinity unleashing his eternal river in the galaxy that the Joint Peace planet belonged to. As for the others, they only knew how to unleash their power, not how to unleash their mountains and rivers or suns and moons. Anyhow, the bone-chilling cold of her aura was almost about to freeze Ling Han's blood and body. However, this wasn't enough to defeat him. Z. A dense web of lightning instantly erupted from his body, pushing the icy aura 9 meters from his body. "Ice spear," the woman in azure cried softly. A vast amount of icy air condensed to form an ice spear that measured around 3 meters in length. The ice spear viciously stabbed at Ling Han, and as it did so, whirls of frosty wind transformed into countless menacing ice blades. Ling Han tapped a finger in the air, and a profound sword intent that was imbued with the power of lightning surged toward the ice blades. Pa, 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 pa. The ice blades shattered into pieces. Ling Han stood with his hands clasped behind his back, and asked, "Are you done yet?" The woman in azure brandished her ice spear, and replied, "No." She charged over again, relentlessly stabbing with her spear, and even using it as a staff. Under the effects of her martial intent, streaks of divine patterns materialized on her ice spear, intertwining to form a brilliant glow. Ling humphed, and unleashed his full battle prowess. His fists continued to pummel the ice spear. Ka, ka, ka. Cracks started to appear on the ice spear, and after suffering yet another heavy blow, it finally shattered into pieces. Meanwhile, the woman in azure's face was as white as a sheet. Her hair was disheveled, and she no longer appeared as beautiful and charming as before. She couldn't help but feel shocked. Ling Han was only at the low extreme of the sun-moon tier, yet he was actually able to defeat her head-on. His strength was far too astonishing. However, she wasn't willing to admit defeat. She retrieved a divine seal, and was just about to slap it onto her body. "Qing Luo, enough." An enchanting voice traveled out from the carriage. The owner of this voice was none other than the head of the Treasure Forest Pavilion's big trade city branch, Lin Yuqi. A fragrant breeze blew over, and the door to the carriage opened, revealing a breathtaking beauty. Her figure was perfect, and one couldn't help but become lost in fantasies upon seeing her. Moreover, it was clear that this woman knew how to take full advantage of her charm. She wasn't just standing there. Instead, her slender figure was leaning slightly such that the curves of her body were all accentuated to the extreme. Her beauty was truly intoxicating. "Grandmaster Ling, I'm not some terrifying beast." "Are you afraid I'll bite?" she said with a soft laugh. She was as beautiful as a blossoming flower in the wind. Hearing her say this, Ling Han naturally couldn't ignore her and leave anymore. He smiled, and said, "Does Milady have something to tell me?" "Let's get on the carriage first," Lin Yuqi said with a charming smile. Ling Han hesitated briefly before nodding and following her to the carriage. Ling Yuqi turned around and entered the carriage first. She was wearing a red dress that hugged her figure tightly, and standing behind her, Ling Han could clearly see her willowy hips swaying back and forth. Meanwhile, her curvaceous bottom was also tightly hugged by her dress. He could see it swaying with each step she took, and it was truly mesmerizing enough to make one drool with lust. Ling Han had seen his fair share of beauties. Moreover, in terms of charm, Empress Luan Xing was 10 times more enchanting than her. However, in terms of knowing how to display one's beauty in the most seductive and provocative method, this woman definitely took the crown. Even he didn't dare to look too much. He was afraid that he would become too aroused. Chapter 1234, Seeing Another Bewitching Beauty. Lin Yuqi's each and every action was seductive and bewitching. Empress Luan Xing was born a stunning beauty, and even her silhouette was enough to draw people into endless fantasies. Meanwhile, this woman accentuated her charm through various kinds of small movements. She swayed her bottom left and right. This was so seductive that people would barely be able to control themselves. With each sway, the shape of her curvaceous bottom would be accentuated, revealing the breathtaking assets of this stunning beauty. If people saw this, they would feel an urge to reach over and caress her bottom so that they could personally experience its fullness, suppleness, and softness. Ling Han guarded his mind closely. This was another bewitching beauty. To his surprise, Lin Yuqi's hairstyle wasn't one of a married woman, even though the Maiden Azure had referred to her as Milady. Generally speaking, married women would tie their hair into a bun. Young unmarried women definitely wouldn't adopt such a hairstyle. Lin Yuqi's silky black hair rolled down her back, only revealing a tiny bit of her snow-white neck. The silky black and snow-white formed an intense contrast. "This has nothing to do with me," Ling Han immediately said in his mind. Although she wasn't married, did that mean he could take her as his own? Clearly not. Thus, he naturally didn't need to take her charm to heart. The carriage was only so big, yet Lin Yuqi somehow managed to walk for a long time. She seared the image of her bewitching figure into Ling Han's mind. Only now did she turn around with a smile, and say, "Please sit, young Master Ling." Her smile was as beautiful as 100 blossoming flowers. The entire carriage seemed to become more radiant and warm. Ling Han smiled faintly as he sat down. He then asked, "Madam, for what reason did you invite me?" He was in a hurry to go to the Water Element Valley at this moment, so he truly didn't want to waste any time. Lin Yuqi almost jumped up in anger upon seeing the hint of impatience in his eyes. She was confident in her charm, and she enjoyed having people in the palm of her hand. She loved it when they became mesmerized with her, and she loved it when they embarrassed themselves or revealed the ugliness of their character. She never denied that she was a bewitching woman. This was just how aloof and heartless one she was. Who told her to be so beautiful and bewitching? Her beauty allowed her to do anything she wanted. However, Ling Han actually dared to feel impatient before her. This was a slap to her face. If this impatience had been on Ling Han's face, she could say with certainty that he was doing it on purpose. He was playing hard to get. If that were the case, he could be regarded as an experienced womanizer. However, there was an expression of calm on Ling Han's face. Meanwhile, that look of impatience was coming from his eyes. This led her to believe that he was truly impatient with her. Eyes didn't tell lies. Moreover, Lin Yuqi was a woman who had great experience in toying with men. He wasn't having any improper thoughts about her, and she could easily detect this fact. She was extremely ticked off. Lin Yuqi calmed herself down. How could a bewitching beauty like her fail in seducing a small youth? She flashed him a beautiful smile. This was a mesmerizing smile that could melt even hardened steel. "Must I have a reason to invite young Master Ling?" she asked lazily. It was as if her voice had little hands that tickled him softly, trying to arouse his flames of lust. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "If there's nothing you want to say, then please excuse me for taking my leave." He stood up and turned around to leave. Oi! Oi! Lin Yuqi was genuinely about to explode in anger. She dashed forward at an incredible speed and blocked Ling Han's path. Ling Han's expression suddenly became serious. This breathtaking and seemingly provocative woman was actually an elite. In fact, he hadn't even seen her movements clearly. It was extremely likely that if she had suddenly attacked him, he would have been hit. However, her voluptuous breasts were right before him, almost about to touch him. Ling Han frowned, and had no option but to take a step back. He already had enough lovers, and he naturally wouldn't dump any of them. So, he definitely didn't want to take any new partners. Lin Yuqi squinted her eyes upon seeing this. Her eyes were each like a slit at this moment, yet they were still enough to capture any man in the world. She laughed in a silvery voice before asking softly, "What are you afraid of? Are you scared that I'll bite?" Holy sh*T. Ling Han nodded seriously, and said, "Madam, please watch yourself." Lin Yuqi let out a long and silvery laugh. Her breasts shook as she laughed, and they made one want to transform into a beast and leap onto her so that they could personally experience the size and sensation of her breasts. People all say that a concubine is better than a wife, and a lover is better than a concubine one. Hee, want to experience someone else's wife, she murmured softly. Her voice was dripping with temptation. "Brat, submit to my charm. Once you show any sign of affirmation, see how I beat you to death. I'll then make you my slave, and have you become a coolie forever." "Humph, that's the price for daring to lust over me." Ling Han smiled, and said, "Madam, you've had too much to drink. You're really quite drunk. Alright, I've got no time for such games. If you don't allow me to leave, I'll have no option but to destroy your carriage." Lin Yuqi was astounded. This man had rejected her yet again. Woo! She suddenly sat down in sorrow and started to sob. "What are you playing at now? I didn't touch a single hair of yours, so why are you acting like someone harassed you? The less time I spend with this woman the better. Time to leave." Ling Han was just about to leave, yet there was suddenly a blur in front of his eyes. Lin Yuqi, who had been squatting on the floor and sobbing just then, had blocked his path again. The strength of this woman was truly profound. Ling Han hadn't noticed her movement at all. "You're bullying me," Lin Yuqi sobbed. However, she was a seductive beauty to begin with, so her sobbing simply made people feel she was extremely pitiful. They would more so feel an intense urge to leap over and conquer her. This kind of high and mighty noblewoman can best stimulate men's desire to destroy and conquest. Men will yearn to rip her clothes off and make her kneel under their. Fuck. Ling Han grimaced as he suddenly came to his senses. This woman was far too enchanting. She had made his thoughts wander so far. He hurriedly thought about Empress Luanxing. Once her stunning appearance appeared in his mind, Lin Yuqi instantly lost her charm and luster. She appeared especially ordinary now, and nothing she did could make him feel aroused. The Empress can actually be used as a mind-purifying medicine. This is brilliant. Lin Yuqi clicked her tongue in wonder. I've already pulled out all my tricks, yet you actually seem disgusted? She was truly stumped at this moment. Could it be that she actually had to strip? She was merely playing with men's emotions. However, she had no desire to sacrifice herself for such games. "Young Master Ling, please sit," she said with a serious expression. Was there still any trace of tears on her seductively beautiful face? Ling Han was almost driven mad. "Are we that familiar with each other? Is it really all right for you to play around like that?" However, the strength of this woman was truly profound. If she insisted on making him stay, there was no way that Ling Han could leave, unless he used his Black Tower. However, Ling Han had become more cautious after learning about the Celestial Realm, and he more so didn't want to expose the secret of his Black Tower. What kind of existence was the Black Tower? The reincarnation tree needed 12 trillion years to mature in the outside world, yet this exorbitant amount of time was cut down to 3 years in the Black Tower. Although the reincarnation tree's effects hadn't reached its peak yet, it was still extremely heaven-defying. This would probably be a precious treasure even in the celestial realm, right? However, he still had yet to reach the Genesis tier. So, wouldn't he be seeking death if he allowed beings of the celestial realm to find out about his Black Tower? Chapter 1235, Guest Elder. "What can I do for you, madam?" Ling Han asked in a deep voice. He did not even know who she was at this point. Lin Yuqi smiled beautifully, and answered, "I am the shopkeeper of the Treasure Forest Pavilion." Ling Han was a little curious. Such a bewitching vixen whose abilities were unfathomable was actually the shopkeeper of a pharmacy. He mocked her internally, yet showed nothing in his expression, and said, "So it is shopkeeper Lin." TSK, I do not like this form of address." Lin Yuqi shook her head, and sat down in an incredibly graceful position. Then, she crossed her legs, and rose up a long leg from the high slit in her skirt. It was slender, delicate, and as fair as ivory. Because the inside of this carriage was furnished very lavishly, and a thick fur carpet was laid out on the floor, she did not even wear any shoes, and showed off one of her beautiful feet. Her 5 delicate toenails were painted bright red, contrasting sharply with the fairness of her beautiful foot. If it was someone with some unique fetish, they would definitely want to kneel down and lick that foot. What was more fatal was that she was even lightly waving her leg, and the waves of fragrance spreading out from her caused one's eyes to involuntarily sneak into her skirt, wanting to see even more of the beautiful scenery. Unfortunately, they would only be able to see a little bit of a fair thigh. "Why don't you call me Big Sister?" Lin Yuqi pursed her lips over a finger, her teeth as white as snow and her eyes hazy, causing one to be drunk on her charm. "Madam Lin." Ling Han was unmoved. Big Sister Lin would work too. Lin Yuqi possessed an indomitable tenacity. "Madam Lin." Ling Han insisted. Lin Yuqi couldn't help but sigh. She had really never seen a man like this, being so cold and apathetic, which filled her with some curiosity. She knew that when a woman began to be curious about a man, it was a dangerous signal, and it was very possible that she would be lost because of that. However, she was confident that she would definitely be able to control herself, causing him to be lost in her charms instead. Fine then. Lin Yuqi finally made no further insistence on the address. Does little brother Han know how much trouble you would attract after successfully concocting the berserk blood spirit pill? A muscle twitched in Ling Han's cheek. This woman had not compromised in the least. What did she mean by, fine? She no longer requested him to call her big sister, yet addressed him as, little brother Han, wasn't it the same? He couldn't bother to argue the point with her, as that would only get them further and further off topic. Furthermore, this woman was obviously an expert at bringing the conversation off topic, so he could not allow her to mislead him. What kind of trouble? He asked. The berserk blood spirit pill can boost up a sun-moon tier by a sub-minor level, and has been called the holy pill of the sun-moon tier. As long as they have not reached the peak stage of the consummate level of sun-moon tier, they would definitely target little brother Han, Lin Yuqi said sweetly, displaying her enchantment and seductiveness in front of Ling Han without the slightest care. Ling Han smiled, and asked, since that is the case, then wouldn't those sun-moon tiers be polite to me, and treat me as a respected guest? Lin Yuqi laughed loudly with abandon, once more allowing Ling Han's eyes to fully enjoy the beautiful sight of her heaving curves. She shook her head, and asked, little brother Han does not have any background, and the Han Lin Pavilion is only a small place, so how could it possibly intimidate them enough? Once the news spreads out, it won't take too long, and little brother Han should soon be captured and forced to concoct alchemical pills all day. Little brother Han doesn't think that just because alchemists have outstanding status, they would be able to go anywhere in this world, right? Of course not. The reason why alchemists had outstanding status was because the cultivators had need of them. Since this status had been given to them by cultivators, whether they recognized this kind of lofty status would also have to depend on the mood of the cultivators. An alchemist without any background to support him was really only a tool that could be used to concoct alchemical pills. Ling Han smiled, and asked, then what does Madam suggest? Join the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Lin Yuqi said, her face suddenly serious. Previously, she had looked so seductive, looking like she wanted to entrance him to death, but then she suddenly became so formal, and was incredibly serious. This kind of difference was too big, and Ling Han was slightly unable to accept it. Ling Han shook his head, and said, though the Treasure Forest Pavilion is a powerful force, and can reach the higher-ups, I cannot possibly leave the Han Lin Pavilion. Lin Yuqi broke into an entrancing smile again, and said, I did not request that little brother Han leaves the Han Lin Pavilion. Since little brother Han can become the senior elder of the Han Lin Pavilion, why can you not multitask and be a guest elder of the Treasure Forest Pavilion as well? Ling Han was surprised. This was indeed a big gift. The Treasure Forest Pavilion was indeed a massive entity, its branches spread all over the Cloud Apex planet. Even the Crimson Flames Emperor had to give them some face. Then, with this seal of protection, what other sun-moon tier would dare touch a single hair on Ling Han's head? However, it was not that Ling Han was worried that a powerful force would truly capture him and force him to keep concocting alchemical pills, but rather thought of the 5 sects. The 5 sects managed to survive for so many years in the immortal realm, and had refined the lower realm into the realm pill so many times. How could it be that there was really no one who knew about in the whole immortal realm? Behind them, there might be an even stronger force that was covering for them. If Ling Han was all by himself, then after he clashed against the 5 sects, and the latter was no match for him, they would definitely seek help from the force supporting them. However, if Ling Han also drew out the seal of protection from the Treasure Forest Pavilion, then would the force behind the 5 sects still dare move? Even if the 5 sects did not have such a force to support them, they would also have some kind of allies, wouldn't they? The Treasure Forest Pavilion was sufficient to intimidate these people, and force them to stay out of this matter. Not bad, not bad. This identity was very useful. Thinking so, Ling Han nodded, and answered, then, I shall gladly accept. Thank you, madam. Lin Yuqi smiled sweetly, then raised a single finger, and said, however, I have one condition. Ling Han nodded. She naturally would not do him a big favor like this for no reason, so it was very natural that she would have conditions. He asked, what condition? If it was nothing too demanding, he would agree. However, if she wanted him to surrender himself, that was absolutely impossible. This condition of Lin Yuqi's was not the slightest bit XXX. Choose either condition. 1. Concoct a berserk blood spirit pill for me every 10 years, or 2. Teach the method of concoction to that girl, Xinyan. These two conditions could really not be considered simple. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then asked, Madam can get hold of the fruits of the Red Rain Divine King tree? This was the crucial ingredient for concocting the berserk blood spirit pill. Without this main ingredient, all other ingredients would be wasted. If I couldn't, how would I possibly dare to offer such a condition? Lin Yuqi asked, filled with confidence. Ling Han nodded slightly, and then said, fine. I shall teach the method of concoction to Miss Han. In the case of the first condition, he would have to be tied to the Treasure Forest Pavilion for his whole life, so it would be best that he chose the second. Though teaching another to concoct an alchemical pill would require a very long period of time, it would get things done once and for all. Moreover, he only had to copy down the pill recipe and pass it to Han Xinyan, and when she had more or less grasped it, he would take out a bit of time to guide her along. To him, the time spent would not be very long. Yet Lin Yuqi was slightly disappointed. Ling Han's answer had once again proved that her charms were ineffective, or he should have chosen the first condition. Then, wouldn't he be able to see her a few more times? This damn brat, I don't believe that you won't fall for me. Chapter 1236, Where is the Beauty? Finally, Lin Yuqi allowed Ling Han to get off the carriage. She didn't need to rush the temptation. Fuck. However, when Ling Han had alighted from the carriage, he couldn't help but shout a curse loudly. When he had been conversing with Lin Yuqi, he didn't know where the carriage had carried him off to. The place he alighted in was actually a dense forest, and he couldn't spot any signs of the city at all. Women were indeed petty. That azure-robed maidservant obviously bore a secret grudge against him, and had thus steered the carriage to who knew where, then tossed him out. Wasn't this a deliberate trap for him? He shook his head, and jumped onto the tip of a tree. After observing for a while, he first headed in a specific direction. When he came to a small town, after making some inquiries, he finally found out that this place was actually more than 800 miles away from Big Trade City. That carriage was really quite fast. They didn't seem to have been traveling all that long, did they? Ling Han decided to simply not return to Big Trade City. In any case, his aim was Water Element Valley, and coincidentally, after he left Big Trade City, he just happened to have to travel in this direction too. Hence, not only was he not lost, he had instead gotten a free ride. If the azure-robed woman found out, wouldn't she explode in fury? Ling Han laughed, and set off. After only 2 days, Ling Han had arrived at the Water Element Valley. According to the information provided by Kang Xiu Yuan and Yun Yong Wang, he arrived at a place in the valley. There was a steep waterfall in this place, and it was covered by peaceful flowers. There was also a small courtyard, and it was like a hidden place of peace and serenity. This was where the heavenly phoenix divine maiden lived in seclusion. Ling Han couldn't help but feel excited. He strode towards the courtyard as he thought of what he would first say when he saw the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. As his thoughts danced, he arrived in front of the main doors. He raised his hand, and was just about to knock when he slightly started as a powerful feeling of anxiety suddenly rose up in his heart. However, he merely paused, and still continued the action of knocking. Knock, knock, knock. After a while, the sound of footsteps was heard from within. Yet Ling Han's brow was slightly creased. That was because these footsteps were not just one person's, but rather 3's, and they were very jumbled up. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden was living in seclusion on her own, so how could there be 3 pairs of footsteps? This was not normal. Instantly, his eyes froze over, and a powerful killing intent rose up in him. If anyone dared harm the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, he would truly commit a massacre without the slightest hesitation. The wooden doors opened, and 3 people appeared at the doorway. They were all men, and were clad in battle armor. It was clear that these suits of armor were slightly old and worn, and there were signs of blood on them as well, exuding an air of aggression and martial force. Furthermore, these 3 men looked to be in their 30s, and wore serious expressions, with an air of unswerving determination characteristic of soldiers. "Who are you?" a man asked, with an arrogance that came from one with a high social position. This man should be a high-ranking military officer in the army, which was why he behaved like general, looking down on a foot soldier from the moment he spoke, a powerful forcefulness in his tone. Ling Han was unmoved, and merely asked calmly, "And who are you people? How dare you?" The other 2 men drew part of the sabers at their waists simultaneously. "Jiang," a crisp sound was heard, bringing a frightening air of violence with them. That was definitely a violent aura that could only be born from years of experience on the battlefield. The man in the center stretched out a hand and pressed down, preventing the other 2 from taking any further action. Then, he turned to Ling Han and said, "I am the left vanguard subordinate to Great General Xia, Ma Zhang." "Who are you? Speak your name." "Great General Xia." "Left vanguard?" Ling Han was surprised. He knew that these 3 people were all soldiers, but what he did not understand was how had the heavenly phoenix divine maiden gotten involved with the army? If that wasn't the case, then why would these 3 people have appeared here? He paused for a moment, and then said, "I am Ling Han, and have come here to seek an old friend. May I know what Lord Ma has come here for?" "Humph, even you dare to mind the business of others," one soldier rebuked, though he did not draw his saber this time. Ling Han smiled calmly, and said, "This is not the battlefield, so there is no need to use the same attitude that you adopt in the army." "Humph, the heavenly phoenix maiden has disappeared. Since you call yourself her old friend, we can just ask you. Where has she gone?" Ma Zhang stared at Ling Han, an astonishing killing intent exuding from his eyes, looking like he would be drawing his saber at the slightest disagreement. The heavenly phoenix maiden had disappeared? Ling Han's heart clenched. And why were these 3 people so determined to seek the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and whose command were they under? His expression turned cold as well. This was his reverse scale, which he could not allow others to touch. "I would like to know as well. Why are you people looking for my friend?" he uttered darkly. "Subdue him." Ma Zhang did not answer, and directly commanded his subordinates to move. Shua, shua, the 2 soldiers instantly raced out. They were definitely not ordinary soldiers. Otherwise, how could they possibly be in the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier? When they made their moves, the powerful force of the Sun-Moon tier spread out, which was incredibly shocking. Yet Ling Han could not even bother himself to parry. He merely gave a humph, and a sliver of heaven's might channeled out. Instantly, the 2 gave a muffled grunt, and couldn't even manage to keep hold of their sabers. With a clink, the sabers fell onto the ground, and the 2 men directly flopped onto the ground. They couldn't help but be shocked. Ling Han was only in the low extreme as well. Moreover, he was only in the early stage, yet they couldn't even manage to use a single move in front of him. This gap was too overwhelmingly big. Ma Zhang's eyes suddenly exploded with an astonishing fighting spirit. Ling Han's abilities had provoked him, making him feel as if he had returned to the battlefield and encountered a frightening opponent. "Why are you seeking the heavenly phoenix maiden?" Ling Han asked again. This time, he did not hide his abilities in the slightest. A frightening aura rolled out as if a king had descended. "Brat, you are too arrogant." Ma Zhang humphed, drew out his saber, and charged out. Shua, bright light exploded, and shot out towards Ling Han. Ling Han clenched his fist, and greeted the incoming saber light with a punch. Peng, when his fist landed on the saber light, an incredible light exploded. Peng, 2 soldiers were instantly sent flying, and underneath the massive wave of power, the doors to the courtyard were also destroyed in a single instant. Ling Han was enraged, and exclaimed, "Bastard, you actually dare destroy this place." He raised his fists and threw a series of consecutive punches that landed on Ma Zhang. Ma Zhang was both furious and shocked. He wasn't the only one who was causing fuck damage in this place, okay? Didn't Ling Han move as well? And he actually dared to blame him. This was really a case of a monk insulting a bald man. Still, this brat was practically a freak. He was obviously only in the early stage of the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, so how could his battle prowess not be inferior to his in the least? It should be known that he himself was in the peak stage of the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, and his power was much stronger than Ling Han's. It was just that the latter actually had a frightening intimidation, causing him to keep performing abnormally, unable to fully exhibit his power, and he could only bring things to a draw. This was too shocking. When did such a young king tier appear in the Imperial Empire? Lose, he called out loudly as he brandished his saber in a series of mad blows. He was a soldier that had years of experience in the battlefield, and the thing he lacked the least was fighting spirit. Humph. Ling Han threw one punch after another, which landed madly on Ma Zhang. Peng, peng, peng. The two were engaged in a fierce battle. One had stronger power, but the other possessed a sliver of heaven's might, and the victor was actually undecided. However, this courtyard naturally became very unfortunate, shattered into bits by the push and pull of power, and had completely turned into ruins. Chapter 1237, Whereabouts of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. After battling for quite a while, Ling Han and Ma Zhang stopped fighting at the same time. Neither of them had been serious, and they were wary of each other as well. Who knew what trump cards the other had up his sleeve? Brat, we will meet again. Ma Zhang brought the two soldiers with him and turned to leave. Of course we will meet again. You still have to rebuild this courtyard for me. Ling Han called out behind him. Ma Zhang almost stumbled. This brat was really keeping this in his mind constantly. Fuck, it wasn't just him at fault here. Ling Han watched the other party leave, and did not pursue. Obviously, he had also missed his aim, and did not know where the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was. This was the reason why Ling Han had not continued to fight with him. Furthermore, he already knew who he was, in any case he a subordinate of Great General Xie. Great General Xie? It should be Xie Qian, one of the 4 great generals of the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire. Rumor had it that he was an elite of the Eternal River tier, but his exact cultivation level was unknown. If this kind of elite did not choose to reveal it himself, who would be able to estimate his cultivation level? Since that was the case, he could run, but he couldn't hide. Ling Han turned around. Perhaps Kang Xiuyuan and Yun Yong Wang would know where the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had gone, or perhaps she might have even gone to the Lin Pavilion, and he had just missed her. 2 days later, he came back to Big Trade City. Master. Master. Once Kang Xiuyuan saw him, he immediately called out to him, his expression filled with nervousness and panic. What is it? Ling Han asked. A letter from Mistress. Kang Xiuyuan handed a letter over. Ling Han's heart was filled with worry in the first place, so he hurriedly snatched the letter. As his eyes swept over the letter, he soon found out the gist of the story. The matter was actually very simple. The Cloud Phoenix sect expressed the intention to develop relations with Great General Xie to increase their status. But as a powerful elite of the Eternal River tier, who would take note of a force that was only of the Sun-Moon tier? Then, since they could not develop relations with the Great General Xie directly, they could only do so in a more roundabout way. They sought out the 7th grandchild of the Great General Xie, Xie Donglai. Xie Donglai was an extremely outstanding young man among the younger generation of the Xie clan. He had only cultivated for about 100,000 years, and he was already at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, and now had some say in the Xie clan. If he could break through to Heavenly Body tier as well, he would definitely become an influential person in the Xie clan. Thus, the Cloud Phoenix sect wanted to form an alliance by marriage with the Xia clan, and the other party was this Prince Xia. Xia Donglai came on their invitation, and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was also tricked into coming by her sect. As a result, Xia Donglai took a fancy to the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden with a single look, and after returning to the imperial capital, sent a messenger to deliver the message that he wished to take the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden as a concubine not many days later. For a crucial heir like him, the choice of the candidate for main wife naturally would not be his decision to make. It would rather be used to secure an ally that could be of aid to the Xia clan through marriage, for example a loyal subordinate, or a state official of equal authority. Thus, the small Cloud Phoenix sex member naturally could not possibly be a candidate for main wife, but at least she would be married officially as a concubine, which guaranteed quite a high status as well. From the perspective of the Cloud Phoenix sect, this was a step up the social ladder. The Cloud Phoenix sect naturally agreed happily, but how could the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden be willing? She called herself the Ling family's widow, and that was her stand and a kind of determination. However, though she presently had the abilities to stand against the Cloud Phoenix sect, compared with a colossal entity like the Xia clan, she was indescribably weak. Hence, she decided to go to the two-realm battlefield. Only that was a place the power of the Xia clan was unable to reach. When Kang Xiao Yuan received the letter, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden should have already reached the two-realm battlefield. Ling Han was furious. They actually wanted to force his wife to remarry, wasn't this cuckolding him? This Cloud Phoenix sect was really worthless, forcing an honest girl into prostitution, for their own benefit. That Xia Donglai Tu dared to try and snatch his wife. If he didn't castrate him 10 times, it would not be enough to vent his fury. I plan to immediately go to the two-realm battlefield. Ling Han decided promptly. The two-realm battlefield was really a slaughterhouse of life. Every year, every month, or even every day, the number of people who battled to the death there were uncountable. Though the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's bloodline was strong, and she had also reached the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, in the two-realm battlefield, her abilities were really insufficient. If the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden suffered the slightest injury, he would definitely come back and skin Xia Donglai. As for the Cloud Phoenix sect, needless to say, its fate would be destruction by his hand anyway. Master, we shall go as well. Kang Xiao Yuan and Yun Yong Wang hurriedly proclaimed. Ling Han shook his head, and said, the two of you aren't warriors, so why are you joining in on the excitement? Concoct alchemical pills obediently, and if the two of you have not yet advanced to become level 6 alchemists when I return, just wait to be beaten. Ah! The two cried out desperately. It would need at least a few millennia of accumulation to advance from level 5 to level 6, they were still a far way off. Ling Han did not care. Now that the conflict between the Han Lin Pavilion and Treasure Forest Pavilion had been resolved, his presence was no longer important. However, he had to be true to his word. He decided to first make a trip to the Treasure Forest Pavilion, and teach the pill recipe for the Berserk Blood Spirit pill to Han Xinyan, and then head out to the two-realm battlefield. In any case, it was just a short trip. Yin Yong Wang and Kang Xiao Yuan naturally backed Ling Han's idea to find the mistress. They both nodded. On one hand, they had to protect the Han Lin Pavilion, and complete Ling Han's Mishianto by as much level 5 godly metal as possible, and on the other, they had to work hard on their alchemy skills so that they could advance to become level 6 alchemists. Ling Han set out all by himself, and did not alert his two brothers. He did not bring his disciple, Ding Ping, either. He even abandoned his 4 followers in Big Trade City. The two-realm battlefield was really too dangerous. Only the Azura Demon Emperor and old Ginseng were still left in the Black Tower. To others, the Black Tower did not have spiritual qi, so it was not a suitable place for cultivation, and it only had the reincarnation tree to aid the comprehension of Tao. But for old Ginseng, it was different because he himself was a Tao cultivated from a godly medicine of heaven and earth, and the Black Tower had the ability to speed up the growth of plants. For him, though it was not as exaggerated as that, its benefits were still quite big. Thus, He liked to stay in the Black Tower to absorb that kind of power when he had nothing else to do. Moreover, he liked to root himself under the reincarnation tree, and could comprehend Tao while he was at it. His improvement was very fast, and he looked just about ready to advance into the Sun-Moon tier. Of course, if you wanted old ginseng to focus and work hard on cultivation, that was impossible. He would frequently come out and tease girls and women in Big Trade City. As long as they were the slightest bit beautiful, practically none had managed to escape from old ginseng's demonic claws. Ling Han soon arrived at the Treasure Forest Pavilion. Lin Yuqi had obviously made arrangements for him. The moment he appeared, the staff in the shop immediately greeted him respectfully as Elder Ling, and were incredibly reverent. "Yo, have you missed me?" Lin Yuqi walked in a waft of fragrance, directly forcing her way to stand right in front of Ling Han, her proud breasts only 1 or 2 inches away from Ling Han at most. Ling Han looked at anywhere but her, and said, "I have come to look for Han Xinyan to teach her the pill recipe of the Berserk Blood Spirit pill." Lin Yuqi couldn't help but get irritated. In Ling Han's eyes, couldn't she even compare that inexperienced, flat-chested little girl? "Calm down. Calm down," she advised herself, then waved a hand, and had someone bring Ling Han to find Han Xinyan as she scrambled her brains. How would she be able to enlighten a blockhead? The difficulty was huge. Led by a maidservant, Ling Han entered into a backyard. This was obviously private territory, and only multiple beautiful maidservants would occasionally appear, with no further signs of any outsiders. Chapter 1238, Two-Realm Battlefield. Miss Han is Madam's distant relative. The young maid leading Ling Han in had a very gossipy nature, and unendingly talked about Lin Yuqi and Han Xinyan. In short, the two women had a very close relationship, or Han Xinyan would not have come to such a small city for no reason. When she had brought Ling Han to a courtyard, the maid curtsied, and said, "Miss Han should be presently meditating inside. I do not dare disturb her, so it would be better if you yourself knock on the door, young master." As she said so, she turned around, and left. This was really irresponsible. Ling Han knocked on the doors. Knock, knock, knock. After a while, he heard footsteps. Squeak, the doors were opened, revealing an almost naked person. It was Han Xinyan. Fuck, even she wanted to tempt him? Ah. Han Xinyan suddenly released a sharp shriek. Bang, the doors immediately closed again. Ling Han rubbed his nose. He had almost been hit by the doors when they closed. After only a short while, the doors were opened once more, and Han Xinyan was aggressively rushing out. This time, she had naturally dressed herself, her hand wielding a sword, and she slashed out at Ling Han. "How dare you, you shameless bee ******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************* hurriedly dodged. Though this woman was indeed outstandingly talented in alchemy, in martial arts, she did not have corresponding abilities. Ling Han merely sent out the heaven's might in a slight wave, and her body weakened. How could she possibly have the ability to attack further? Do not misunderstand. I have just come to teach you the method of concoction for the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill, he said, smiling. Han Xinyan paused, delivered a few more slashes, and only then withdrew her long sword regretfully. She rebuked, Ling Han sighed, and said, I didn't do anything to you, right? I was just normally knocking on the door, and you were the one who came out completely undressed. Han Xinyan couldn't help but flush. She had a bad habit, and that was that she liked to remove all her clothing when she was studying a pill recipe. Only then would she have inspiration. Moreover, this was the internal courtyard of Lin Yuchi, where there was not one man. Hence, she naturally had no fear that she would be exposing her nakedness. But who'd have known that a man would have appeared all of a sudden like this, and seen her completely? This was so humiliating. She glared fiercely at Ling Han, and said, This matter. Never speak of it again. She was not an unreasonable person, and knew that the fault did not lie with Ling Han. Yet, she was still extremely displeased internally. A woman with small breasts would also have little tolerance. Ling Han thought. This woman was really flat-chested. In truth, even when she had undressed completely, he had not seen much. If it was merely looking at her breasts, she could absolutely disguise herself as a man. All right. He went with the flow, and also feared that she would hang on to him, saying something along the lines of him having seen her completely exposed, so she could marry no one but him. He directly threw out a book, and said, "This is the pill recipe of the Berserk Blood Spirit pill, you can study it on your own first. I have some matters to handle, so I have to leave Big Trade City for a while. If you have anything you do not understand, you can note it all down, and ask me when I return." Xinyan was irritated. They were both level 8 alchemists, yet he looked like he was teaching her. Did he think of her as a junior? But now that she had obtained the pill recipe for the Berserk Blood Spirit pill, she couldn't bring herself to become hostile with Ling Han. She could only store away the pill recipe in much displeasure. At this time, she really dared not declare stubbornly that she refused to accept the pill recipe. Ling Han waved a hand, and left for the two-realm battlefield. He set out to the frontier grounds of the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire and Blue Cloud Imperial Empire. That was where the two-realm battlefield was located. The Netherworld and the Immortal Realm had one similarity in this place. The Netherworld could invade the Immortal Realm through this place, while the Immortal Realm could also enter the Netherworld from here. The cloud-piercing shuttle was no longer suitable for traveling around one planet. Thankfully, Ling Han had already grasped the star-plucking step, and added with the lightning technique he had cultivated from studying the heavenly tribulation, his present speed was extremely amazing. In a mere 20 days, he had already reached the two-realm battlefield. Before he had set out, he had first refined a Berserk Blood Spirit pill. He had spent a whole 3 days to digest the medicinal effects completely, and the red sun within his body suddenly doubled in size, allowing him to advance into the middle stage of the low extreme. Why was this kind of alchemical pill called Berserk? Because the medicinal effects were indeed berserk. Even if Ling Han's physique had reached the extent of level 6 godly metal, the force had still caused lacerations on his flesh, and he had even broken a few of his godly bones. No wonder that if they weren't in the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, other Sun-Moon tier cultivators had to take this medicine only under the care of other elites. Otherwise, they would only explode from the berserk medicinal effects. If they had died from merely taking an alchemical pill, that would have been too much of a waste. After taking the pill, with Ling Han's sensitivity as the Alchemy Emperor, he discovered that there was alchemic poison left within his body. If he took another Berserk Blood Spirit pill, then not only could it not possibly produce the effect of increasing his cultivation level, it would instead cause him to die of poison. What kind of concept was one Berserk Blood Spirit pill? It would boost a Sun-Moon tier by a sub-minor level. What kind of damage would that produce if it exploded? It was practically equivalent to a full power blow from a heavenly body tier. What kind of Sun-Moon tier would be able to endure such poison? Ling Han had no solution for it. He kept observing the dispersion rate of the alchemic poison, and came to a conclusion. This was probably going to take as long as 3 years. This also meant that if he did not have any special means to resolve the alchemic poison in his body, he would have to wait 3 years before he could take a second Berserk Blood Spirit pill. But just think that meant it would help him reach the peak stage of the Sun-Moon tier in 50 years at most. What a terrifying improvement rate this was. How long was the lifespan of a Sun-Moon tier? They would have 4 million years to live at consummate level. A whole 4 million years could be cultivated within 50 years. Wasn't that terrifying enough, and wasn't that fast enough? Of course, it could not be compared to Hunyo's speed. The overall level of cultivation of the celestial realm was even higher, producing Genesis tier cultivators like the Immortal Realm produced Shattering Void tiers. It could not be claimed to be easily done, but it probably wasn't all that difficult either. On the Immortal Realm side of the two-realm battlefield, a bridgehead stronghold had been established, and its name was Wolf Fang City. The Wolf Fang city existed to provide a resting place for the soldiers fighting with the Netherworld, a kind of sanctuary, and at the same time, also a stronghold. Once Wolf Fang city was conquered, the armies of the Netherworld would march unchallenged and wreck the entire Cloud Apex planet. There were only two imperial empires on the Cloud Apex planet, the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire and the Blue Cloud Imperial Empire. Thus, the main forces here naturally comprised of the armies from the two great imperial empires. Aside from them, all cultivators and demonic beasts that had reached the immortal level were duty-bound to join the two-realm battlefield. There were a few well-known troops here, like the Purple Moon Army under the Purple Moon Divine Maiden, the Wind Riders Army under the Wind Rider Divine King, and the Holy Army under the Wide Travel Monk King. These troops had all established their reputation for being firm and powerful in the Great War between the Netherworld and the Immortal World. When they came to the two-realm battlefield, a cultivator could freely choose one out of two options. Firstly, he could join an official army and join the war as a soldier, and when he had accumulated enough merit points, he could retire from the army with glory. Secondly, he could also act alone and hunt down the beings from the Netherworld. This similarly would accumulate merit points. Merit points were the unique currency in the two-realm battlefield. Though resistance against the invasion from the Netherworld was right and just, they couldn't compel others to throw away their heads and spill their blood with just one word, right? Hence the idea of merit points. One could use merit points to redeem various types of alchemical pills, god tools, and even cultivation techniques, or others. And once the total value of merit points had been accumulated to a certain extent, one could choose to retire from the army. It had already been said that joining the two-realm battlefield to resist the invasion of the Netherworld was the duty of all cultivators of the immortal realm. Everyone had to perform this military service, and if they did not perform it when the time limit had passed, if they were caught, their only fate was execution. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.